Welcome back to the podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Miller. Every week, I chat with fascinating people from all walks of life in order to bring you knowledge, inspiration, and insight. If you enjoy the show, you can support it by subscribing, leaving a review, and sharing it with a friend. This is the Jeremy Miller Podcast. All right, Drew B. Darby, welcome to the podcast, dude. So glad to have you here.
Thanks for having me, Jeremy. Thanks for putting the B in there. Very important for branding.
Dude, the B is so important, I feel like. It distinguishes you. There's actually, you probably heard this, there's like a psychological study or something about how, that's why most presidents or like a lot of like CEOs and like really high level people, they put their middle initial in their like official name when they're like running for office or applying for jobs or whatever, because it has like a psychological effect when people read it. It feels more professional.
Okay, so that's not, the reason that I did it was because the domain was not available. DrewDarby.com. Love Drew Darby. He's a Texas representative. He had the domain, Drew B. Darby was available. And so I was like, I think this was junior year of high school. And I said, this is the brand now. We put in the B so I can just own that.
Well,
but cool to know. Hey, psychological effect.
Dude, it feels like every time I hear Drew B. Darby, I'm like, oh, this guy knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about. He's got that middle initial.
Yeah, it's the brand.
When you were creating that domain name, did you know you'd eventually move to Texas?
Oh, no. Had no idea. I mean, I was just a kid making bad movies with my friends and like posting my photos. I've been posting them on Blogspot, my little photo blog. And I was like, maybe we should have something a little different, something a little more professional to put my photos. And that was just kind of the start. No, I had no idea what it would turn into living in Texas.
Dude, I feel like you've come a long ways. When did you first get into all the media stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I had a funny conversation with another Austin creative a couple of weeks ago, and he said, it feels like you've been in this forever. And I both like really associate with that, but also, I don't know, I still get carded everywhere I go. Like I get asked, I've been in the past year asked, can you sit in the exit row without your parent? Wait,
like, carded like you're not 21? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. on an airplane, at a bar or whatever, like I still get carded. So like I still feel very young, but also, yeah, I mean, I kind of did grow up with a camera in hand. Not like, I mean, my parents weren't in the industry or anything. My mom for sure is a creative, and my dad like loves music and that kind of thing. But I grew up with a camera in hand just because in the summers with my friends, that was the thing. My dad like gave me his old tape camera. Oh, that's and cool. That was kind of the origin where it was like just something to do during the summer. And so we would just go around and film. I mean, whatever, like film our Lego action figures. We made like a WWE wrestling show in my basement. Those clips are out there somewhere. But
how old were you when you like first got that camera?
Man, I was still in like elementary school age. Like this was before middle school. So yeah. I might have been 8 or 9, like just like running around with this tape camera.
No wonder you're so good, dude.
Yeah, I mean, there were a lot of years of like figuring out exactly what to do and for sure. But yeah, like it started out with that, and then I remember at some point my big birthday present was like my own new camera. It was still tape at the time, just because that was cheaper. Like digital cameras were kind of around, but they were expensive.
How old are you? Just for reference, how old are you now?
I'm 27 now.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're born in 95?
96.
96, okay. So this was like 2005, like early 2000s?
Yeah, I want to say that sounds right.
Okay. Yeah, so that was like, when did the first digital camera come out? Do you know?
Yeah, I mean, that was early 2000s when like digital photo cameras were coming out. And I remember it was a big deal when, I don't know if Star Wars The Phantom Menace, but like by the time Star Wars Episode 3 came out, that was like, they are shooting all digital. And it was like, whoa, like this is a big deal that a Hollywood movie is all digital. But I mean, I was coming up, tape was cheaper. And then when I bought my first camera, like my first like real camera, junior year of high school, I bought a Canon T3i. Like the 5D Mark II had been out for a little bit. And that was really where I think a lot of the roots for, especially people who I came up with, like my age, like that was the roots of large format digital, and it was accessible to everyone at that point.
So you started shooting tape, film, obviously, like video. And then when you got that T3i, did that shot digital video too?
Yes.
And digital photos.
And digital photos, yeah. So I was definitely more into photography at that point. I took a film photography class. My high school still offered it. Had an awesome instructor, a super talented photographer. And so it was really fun to like learn that whole darkroom side and figure it out. Like I can't say, I don't still develop my own film or anything like that. It was a little complicated, but it was cool to get used to that. But yeah, the digital, I was really into photo for sure in high school. I remember buying that camera. It was a lot. It was like $800, which for a junior in high school,
Dang.
that's like not nothing. To spend that much like all in one go on a camera. But I mean, I still remember going out on a shoot and being like, oh, flip it into video mode. And I didn't know how to do manual exposure at that point. And so I just couldn't get the auto exposure to look right. And having the conversation with my friends there of like, this just doesn't look right. I don't know if we can shoot, because I had no idea. But then like I messed around with it and somehow figured out manual mode, like put it into that, and like it looked good enough to work on the day. But I mean, there were growing pains. And when I say, and I say this to everyone, like truly like the roots were making bad films with my friends. Like that was it. I was not an auteur director, like producing mind-blowing anything at that stage. Like we were really still figuring it out step by step.
Do you remember the first kind of thing you made, like outside of when you're playing around with the tape as a little kid, like the first thing you shot with like that camera, or the first like thing you edited and like produced? Yeah,
I made a film with two friends of mine, still good friends to today. We actually had this really great, we added on a couple more people later on in high school, but two guys who were in my class. You know, I went to a pretty small school. I graduated with 85 kids. So the fact, I look back at like the people who I was surrounded with, the fact that in this small group, you know, I mean, it was a small school, but they were so talented. But the three of us, we got together and we were like, hey, let's make a little film. Like we've been shooting some photos together. My one friend did music, and we were like, we have 24 hours. Like we have a weekend, you know, we got to get back to high school at some point. We don't have all this time, but we made a film in 24 hours, and we wrote it, we shot it, we edited it all in 24 hours on that camera. And like, I look back at it and yeah, I mean, it's a bad film. It's weird. It's wacky, but like I also saw the gear starting to turn. Like I was figuring out, okay, what does it really look like to make something that's not just like it's a single medium or wide shot and like the action just takes place within the frame. Like how does the camera start to play into crafting a film itself, like where you put it, being intentional with lensing and that kind of thing. And also starting to figure out where the limitations of my gear were at that point. Because I mean, now when people ask me, they're like, what camera should I buy?
Yeah.
And that's always a hard question for me, because I remember buying that T3i and I remember replacing the firmware on it with a side-loaded firmware and figuring out all the different picture profiles, like what was the best one. And I mean, I was adding new firmware to this camera because it didn't have manual audio control.
Oh my god.
Which is like something that we take for granted now.
Yeah.
And now like I'm complaining sometimes my B camera crops in at 4K 60 frames per second, and it crops in a little bit and I'm like, oh, that's such a frame. Like I didn't have 60 frames a second on my first camera. And so it was just that camera, I really wish I still had my T3i, honestly, because that was like just such a good place to begin and a place to learn with like enough limitations that you can't, enough limitations maybe you could still blame the gear, but there was just so much freedom and flexibility of, no, I still need to grow and get better. I haven't quite reached the ceiling of this camera yet.
Dude, that reminds me of Casey Neistat. Like his whole mantra of like, doesn't matter what you're shooting on, just get the shot. It's like how you're using the camera is what's going to determine the quality of the product. Like, I mean, all of his stuff, or like, I mean, I always think back to like films in like the 70s, 80s, or like older, where it's like black and white. It looks, from a quality perspective, it looks like shit, but it's like the story that they're telling and the creativity of the shots and the lighting and all this stuff. It's so much more than like, oh, this camera shoots 4K and this frame rate and these megapixels and all this shit. It's like, it doesn't really matter that much.
Yeah, and working within limitations, like, and we can get back to the story, kind of where things went from here, but I think about growing up shooting on tape. Like, a lot of people who I shoot with now, like they didn't shoot on tape. And while I wasn't editing deck to deck and that kind of thing, like I was doing most of my editing on like a cracked copy of Final Cut Pro 7. But just where I came up was a lot of troubleshooting and a lot of making do. Like now, okay, you go out, you can crack Adobe Premiere and you can get it for free. Not recommending that you do that, but like you can go crack and like you are always going to be the limitation. It's never going to be the software that's the limitation on you, versus like I remember having to transcode every single clip to ProRes and like figuring out how do I do that and how do I store all of my stuff. And I could only afford one hard drive. I lost everything from before my senior year of high school because my hard drive failed. I learned those lessons the hard way. But yeah, just coming up with those limitations of tape and the limitations in the darkroom of shooting film. Those were really great ways to teach me ways around and troubleshooting and figuring it out myself. Because too, at that time, like there wasn't a wealth of back knowledge on digital filmmaking. Everyone was just kind of figuring it out as they went and sharing as they went along. And so all of those, I can tell a difference. I'm not saying that makes anyone better or worse, but I can tell a difference in a working environment with people who came up at that time where we were all just like troubleshooting, trying to make it work. It wasn't go on Amazon, spend $15, get a slider. It was you went to Home Depot and you got PVC pipe and you tried to figure out how to make a slider, or you got furniture sliders and you put them underneath your I have vivid memories of like the furniture sliders underneath the tripod getting these smooth shots. And I was like, whoa, this is cinema. I thought it was the coolest thing ever. Whereas like now it would be like, oh, just go on Amazon, buy a slider. Yeah. Like it won't be great, but it would probably be better than my furniture slider, little janky tripod rig. But I mean, we were just figuring it out at that point.
I feel like it makes it so much more fulfilling though when you're like creating. It again reminds me of Casey Neistat, where he's like, rigging all this stuff up from like PVC pipe and plywood and like the stuff that should not be used in filmmaking, really. But you get the same look, you get the same effect of it. I feel like it's just so much more fulfilling that way too, and you learn more of like the fundamentals of it. I feel like versus just like you said, everything's on Amazon that you could ever need now. Like especially with camera stuff, it's like there are literally no limitations to that stuff now. Were you always like obsessed with movies and like film and stuff like that?
So that's fun. I didn't really watch a lot of movies growing up. Didn't watch, like we didn't have cable TV when I was growing up. Dang. Yeah, just kind of, my parents weren't really, it was like sort of like, some people might say it's like restrictive, sheltering, that kind of thing, like whatever. Like, I was homeschooled, that kind of stuff. But my parents just weren't really into that. Like most of what I watched, honestly, was like old black and white movies. My mom loved Fred Astaire and like these musicals and stuff like that. So I watched a lot of those. But for sure, I also started to get into these like big epic scale. I was also writing a lot at that time. I wrote a ton in middle school and high school, fantasy, adventure, these like big worlds. And I was watching Lord of the Rings. I was watching Star Trek. I was watching Star Wars. And this whole like, you can create something that doesn't exist. Like it, not just like filming what's around you. It's like you can create this whole other world. And so for sure, those were the big. And then, I mean, I guess it would have been in high school probably that The Dark Knight came out. And like, I got introduced to Christopher Nolan. And then that, I mean, you know those films, and so many people who came up with us know those films as like, whoa, that really opened my eyes to like this. It's not just like cool world building, all this other stuff, but these just like so well crafted, deep meaning stories were being told on like the biggest screen possible, and that was so cool. That was so cool to me to like really see what the potential could be for filmmaking.
That's so cool. It's honestly surprising you didn't really watch a lot of TV or movies. Like I remember, I think it's Quentin Tarantino that worked at like Blockbuster. I think it was him. He would just watch like every movie. Like he would just sit in Blockbuster and watch movies all day, and then he's like becomes one of the greatest directors of all time. So that's so crazy that you didn't really watch a lot of stuff. But dude, Lord of the Rings, that was my jam. I love Lord of the Rings.
Oh yeah, that's probably what I've seen. That and The Dark Knight are probably what I've seen the most of over the years.
Do you have a favorite film director now?
I mean, Christopher Nolan will be up there. I got to give a nod now living in Austin to Terrence Malick. Like Terrence Malick's films really.
What's he done?
Most people know him for The Tree of Life, The New World. There's Knight of Cups. There's some of his older work as well that I'm not as well familiar with, but he's just he's really lived into like his own style and way of filmmaking. Like I won't compromise for anything to make it the way I want to make it. And I think that definitely like, I aimed for that and missed a lot, over the years, but him and Christopher Nolan for sure. And I also, dude, I love Michael Bay too. Yeah. Like I love Michael Bay because Michael Bay says, this is what I want to make. This is the style it's going to be. And we're just going to go do it. I love that like singular vision and that singular dedication to like, this is just going to be the piece is going to be, it's cohesive. His body of work is super cohesive because it's just like, I know the style that I like and I'm going to do it.
He's done like Transformers. I think he did like Day After Tomorrow. What
Day
else
After
has he
Tomorrow. I want to say Pearl Harbor. And then there've been more recently just some like one-off Netflix films, but they all, I mean, you could watch a sequence from any of them and be like, yep, that's definitely Michael Bay.
Lots of explosions.
Lots of big fancy camera moves. But he knows how to, he knows how to create a moment, and he knows how to create a feeling. And I think that's what, as I grew up and kind of matured a little bit, that's what I took away from it, is that not just like, he also knows how to create spectacle. He knows how to create like the big spectacles. And so that's what I took away, is just like, okay, so what is he trying to tell? He isn't just trying to like just show you an explosion, right? Like he's trying to create this like this scale and this feeling and this emotion that will propel you into and like keep you locked in the seat. Like, and he creates cinema for the cinema screen.
Yeah.
Like it's best viewed on the biggest screen possible, for sure.
Dude, that's one of my favorite parts about movies, is like there's not a lot of other things that make you feel like movies do. Like like a movie can, if it's done well, can make you feel every emotion on the human emotion spectrum that it's possible. It's like you feel sad or angry or scared or whatever it is. Like it's just, if it's done well with like music and the pacing, and that's one of my favorite things, because it's like this escape, and it's like the emotion. I mean, we're emotional creatures, so it's like I think that's what makes movies so cool. Are you it sounds like you're into like fiction a lot, which is surprising.
Yeah, which is surprising given where my work has gone. But yeah, that's my roots, was making, like, all the short films I made with my friends were narrative.
Really? That's why our little skits are so good.
Yeah. Sometimes we get to flex those muscles. But yeah, dude, like I was writing, I mean, I've written, are they good? No, but I've written tens of thousands of words, hundreds of thousands of words, like as a high schooler. Even going into college, I had a class my senior year writing a big screenplay. And I mean, that one, I have dreams someday of like making a pilot or something like that. But, I've gotten...
That'd be sick.
I don't want to say I've gotten distracted, but like I found other things. I think for a while I thought, okay, film industry means you come up a very specific path. You go, like, I've always been into camera. So I was like, okay, here's the camera department. Like, you're a trainee, you're an AC, maybe you have to start all the way at the bottom as a PA maybe, but then you go up to AC, eventually you're a camera operator, eventually you're a DP, and eventually you're friends with Steven Spielberg. Like, that was my conception of like, okay, filmmaking and video, like, this is what it is. Because that's a lot of the voices that I was, like YouTube was huge in me coming up, like watching channels like Film Riot and stuff like that, who are some of like the OGs of YouTube.
Oh, yeah.
And their aspirations were for filmmaking, like in the Hollywood sense. And so that's just kind of where I thought logically things would end up. Like I remember my first interview to work at a production company in college. They asked me, it was like, what do you want to do after, like, what do you want to do with film and video after school, that kind of thing. I was like, yeah, like I want to make big movies. And he was like, that's cool. That's awesome. Why are you coming to a production company that makes corporate video? And I was like, oh, that's when things started to diverge a little bit, was in college. And not like I was saying no to one dream, but like my eyes were kind of being open to, oh, you can work with cameras, you can be creative, you can do storytelling, and it doesn't just have to be in this one system.
So did you gravitate towards like the more corporate stuff because that was like what was interesting, or that just seemed like the next step?
I mean, for sure, like it was because that was what was going to make money. I remember very distinctly setting the goal. I guess was coming into 2015, so second semester freshman year. New Year's resolutions, they're tacky, whatever, they're weird. But like I've always enjoyed the new year, like at having a very tangible goal, a very accomplishable goal. And 2015, my goal was I want to like do an actual project that I make money from with video. You do the little one-off thing for a friend or a family member. Right. You make a couple bucks here or there. Maybe you win a contest. You win like a gift card. But I was like, okay, I want to do an actual project, because at that point I'd figured out, okay, photography's fun. I'm just as good at video, and less people are good at video, so I can make money that way. And that just kind of was where it landed, was businesses needed money. That was kind of...
Businesses do need money.
Businesses need money. Businesses need marketing. And it was going to be easier for me instead of... Yeah. Like, I remember exploring like crowdfunding for a film that I wanted to make. And I was like, so I have to raise thousands of dollars from like friends and family and hope people get excited. And I had seen so many of these Kickstarters or whatever fail. And I was like, or I can go to a local business or a friend who works with a nonprofit and they'll pay me and cover my time to make a video. I was like, okay, well, for right now, as a kid with a T3i who wants to eventually like get other cameras and stuff, it's like, that might be the way to go for now.
Right. Did you go to film school after high school?
So I did not go to film school. I went to a pretty traditional 4-year liberal arts college, the College of William & Mary, Williamsburg, Virginia. My degree is in film and media. I will say the program I went through was very theory heavy. A lot of watching movies, a lot of writing about movies, and there were 2 or 3 production classes, but the production side of the degree was like very new. So I don't say I went to film school because it wasn't like a NYU or a USC very intensive film program. It was, I did film and media, I did marketing on the side, and I went to a liberal arts college.
Do you feel like going to that or getting that film and what was it? Film
and media.
Film and media degree. Do you feel like that helped you at all? Like in your journey, in your process?
It definitely did. And I know that especially in the creative field, it can be kind of a contentious topic, college or not. I will say, I'll give context to this in that I came from a position of privilege, right? Where my grandparents, some of whom were the first in their family to go to college, they made it a point of, hey, our grandkids we want to give them the opportunity to go to college. And so I owe so much to my grandparents, to my parents for making it possible for me to go to college, because I know it's not possible just financially or just time-wise for some people. For me, though, it was crucial to my development. Like, I think I needed to go through that program because I was making bad films with my friends in our free time. I was not ready to step into a production company and really offer anything of value, like right after high school at the age of 17. And so I needed that time to develop. I needed to meet people. I needed the opportunity. I mean, college afforded me the opportunity to work with cameras that I could never have afforded. You know, the film program did have gear. Canon was a big supporter of the film program. And so I was able to get my hands on cinema cameras, any lens that I wanted, high-end photo cameras that I could never have afforded, like at 17, 18, even 19. Yeah. You know, and so I was... There were computers, there were laptops, there were iMacs, we had audio workstations, all this kind of stuff. And so, yeah, like, did the classes themselves make it possible for me in my everyday life now as a full-time filmmaker and creative? Like, maybe not. But everything that came along with it, the connections that I made working at the media center on campus, that made all the difference. And going through a program where I was able to, in the summers, go and intern at a production company, that was equally as important. I wouldn't say you have to go to college, but I see a significant difference. Not that I won't work with somebody who hasn't worked at a production company or something like that. I see such a huge difference, though, with young people coming up in the industry. Those who have like worked in a traditional production company environment, there's a big difference between somebody who's done that and somebody who's just figured it all out on their own.
Did you end up working for that production company that did a lot of the corporate stuff during college?
Yeah, so I worked for them for 2 summers. Summer after would have been my sophomore year and my junior year. We talked about something after graduation. Things ended up not working out. You know, companies get sold, companies move on, that kind of thing.
What was that like working for a production company? I've worked for like a marketing agency. I'm sure they're kind of similar. What is a production agency? Like, what's a day in the life look like there?
Yeah, so it was small. There were 3 full-time employees and then myself interning and then a couple of contractors. So they had their hands in marketing as well. Like, they were pitching with having to do creative treatments and that kind of thing. But it really just taught me the level of polish and the level of professionalism that's required across the board, from communication in the beginning to delivering the project to working through edits on projects that somebody's writing a check for $20, $30, $40, $50,000. Like, there is a different standard of customer service. There's a different standard of professionalism when you're talking about budgets like that. And my eyes were opened like immediately from, I mean, yes, I was getting paid work, but it was like one-off, $250, $300, make a video. Everyone was just stoked because, oh, I didn't have to do this on my own, like in iMovie, you know. And then walking into, I remember my sophomore year, we went to a resort in Mexico. We shot 21 commercials in 12 days.
Jeez.
and then we had to come back and do post work and edit all that. I'm not saying those were the best things. Like, we learned a lot. Like, there was still, I think there were some growing pains for the production company itself.
Yeah.
But understanding this, the expectation of like what is expected of you to deliver at that level was so crucial to my development.
Dang, that's a lot of pressure, it sounds like.
It was a lot of pressure. I remember operating camera. I wasn't like the lead camera operator, but eventually we split crews, and I was operating camera on one of the commercials, and shooting on my own, and the client was on set, watching the monitor or whatever. And then afterwards she was like chatting with me, and she was like, wait, like, how old are you again? I'm like, yeah, like, I'm 19. And she was like, oh, okay. And I could tell in that moment of like, why are we spending all this money to fly these people out? And I was like, dang. Oh no, like, she's going to be like double checking everything I do. And they were like watching pretty closely from then on. But yeah, I mean, I think that sort of pressure has played into like the stuff that I shoot now, where there are a lot of like, there's only one shot opportunities. Like, with these races that I'm filming right now, it's like, yeah, that finish line moment is one moment. You kind of have to get it and lock it in. And I do pretty well in those situations. And I think a lot of that started with building that confidence. And also working alongside, I worked alongside a great team. I was mentored by an awesome director of photography who's doing big stuff right now. I worked with the head of the production company, was super demanding, super detail oriented, but like that totally reframed how, I mean, that's the reason that I got my first job in the industry, honestly, was because of his attention to detail and what he demanded out of all of us. And like, yeah, it also taught me a little bit about how not to manage a team and how not to manage editors. But I mean, I wouldn't trade that experience for anything else.
Dude, that's so cool. It makes a lot of sense now why you are the way that you are. Like, when we shoot together, it's like, I know you make it so easy for me, because like, dude, like, even today we have a shoot after this, and it's like 4 hours before, and I still don't have the script figured out totally, and you're just like, here, let's just do this. And it's like the detail and like professionalism, even though we're just friends, like, I don't care if you mess something up, but it's like, it's still there.
I mean, I've made mistakes on shoots with you, and it's also a big thing to me to own up to those. Like, that's something that I also saw at the production company, was it wasn't just like make mistakes, and like, if something goes wrong, you don't just like blame it on everybody else and then hope that the client is like, oh, whatever. No, you have to fix it. You have to make it right somehow, whether it's we go and reshoot, or okay, I'm going to have to handle the edit now instead of just passing it off to somebody else. Like, those are the things that I watched this production company go through. And so that's just like built in now for me, is that, we're friends and we have a great time on set, but also like I have a standard, and I don't want that standard to be lowered just because we're having fun on set.
Yeah. I appreciate that. I respect it for sure. What was the, do you remember the first like paid gig you had, like freelance? So just to backtrack a little bit. So you, high school, making fun films with your friends with the T3, and then went to film school. We'll just call it film school after that. Was there like a freelance period at all in between that? Or was it straight out of high school to school?
Yeah, it was straight out of high school to college. So I had a summer internship with a nonprofit right after my freshman year, and that ended up turning into, a friend of a friend who worked there ran a YouTube channel, and they no longer wanted to deal with the editing. And so that became my first, actually, I worked with them for, I want to say, 5 or 6 years.
Dang.
Just editing. I mean, it wasn't a ton of videos. It was 1, maybe 2 a month. But I mean, they were doing brand deals with, brands like Allstate. Like that, again, there's this standard when you're doing a brand deal that has the Allstate "Are You in Good Hands" logo stamped on the front and the end. And I was ready for that because of this production company experience that I had. And so that was, I don't know if that was like the first paid gig that I had, but that was the first client that sticks in my memory and that I got to keep doing repeat work, because that's also something that I love doing. And I'm sure that comes through in the work even now that I do is, the one-off projects are fun. And sometimes there's a nice thing about like you go and you shoot for a day, you shoot for 2 days, 3 days, you hand off the footage, you shake hands, and that's kind of it. But I love building those longer-term relationships where you get to develop like a shared understanding, a shared language for how the video goes, and a shared language for design and that kind of thing. And that was fun to develop with. I didn't expect it. I expected it to be like 3 or 4 months, and then, they'd move on to somebody else. But it ended up, I want to say it was 5 or 6 years.
Dang.
Just chipping away at videos. And that was also where I started to dip my toe into affiliate marketing and like building YouTube channels and optimizing for SEO and all those other things where they weren't asking me to do that at that stage. I do remember, I think it was my senior year of college. I was like, hey, I think I can make you guys some more money and let me just play around with this. And they were like, sure, cool. Why not? Like we don't really optimize our thumbnails or anything like that. We're doing fine. We're making money. And so that was where I started to. I'm not saying like I'm not a thumbnail designer or anything like that by trade, but that's where I got to start experimenting, start seeing what worked. And it was at a scale that it made sense versus like my YouTube videos, you know, all right, we were getting like 5 or 10 views. If I changed the thumbnail, that might not make a big difference. But when we're talking like 40, 50,000 views, that kind of thing, then it was like, okay, now we're at scale where I can start to see the impact of what are the different levers that I can push and pull to get content out there.
Dude, the YouTube game is crazy. There's so many variables. Like the thumbnail's obviously huge, the title, the description, like the tags. There's so much that goes into the video. Like Mr. Beast is like probably the best example with all that stuff because he like had obviously optimized it. Like I remember him, you probably heard this, he talked about like he'd have these like daily masterminds with his friends when they were trying to figure out YouTube, and they would just analyze every aspect of a video, like the hook, the ending, like the pacing of the video, everything. And it's just like they dialed it into this like crazy system that they have now. They figured out YouTube essentially. And
it's so cool that YouTube has changed a lot. Like that's what I came up watching. You know, I wasn't watching TV, but I was watching YouTube. Right. And it's been fun to watch YouTube change from being this like videos were 3 minutes and 30 seconds for like the longest time. It was like you either do a Vine or you do like a 3-minute video. And like that was the format. And it was like, oh, don't make it too long or whatever. And now, the best performing YouTube video that I've ever like owned, directed, shot, edited, put on YouTube is 48 minutes long. Has 250,000 views.
Which one is that?
That was a film that I made with Sally McCrae this year at the Cocodona 250 called Every Step Forward.
That one did better than Choose Strong?
Yes, that one did better than Choose Strong, things are different when you work internally at a company versus where you have like more control. But like I've worked 2 staff jobs in my life where YouTube has kind of been my job, but I've always been a little, there've always been other people who it's also like overlapping with. And when you work a corporate job, like there is some structure and that kind of thing. There's only so much that you can change and experiment with. Right. And so that was a fun one this year. That Every Step Forward was my first project after I went freelance, working with Camelbak, who was an awesome supporter for that film. And that was a really fun one to like put into practice. All the stuff I've been seeing, I've been studying, I've been like practicing a little bit. Like my YouTube channel has grown a little bit beyond like 5 or 10 views, but like we're still not, don't go look me up on YouTube. It's not that cool. But
you've got great videos. You've had a few pop off, haven't you?
Pop off. Like we're talking like 40, 50,000 views at
the
top. Yeah. It was fun. I learned so much. That was the best thing, was like learning so much there and then being able to apply that and see it because do I think that, and I don't expect anybody who listens to this to be familiar with my filmography, but basically Sally McCrae, good friend of mine, one of those people who now I've worked with over a period of time. I've shot a dozen races with her or whatever. We talk all the time. I was late to this podcast because we were talking about our next film we're working on, but it's just fun to see, like, I think that the first film I made with her was better, but the second one did better. And I think a lot of that second one was that I was able to really put into place some marketing and then just some tactics. Because what I love about filmmaking, especially online, is that there's art and there's tactics. Like, I think in high school and stuff, I was making these narrative films and everything, and it was just like, it was so art. There was no, like, why should people watch it other than, like, me, my friend who's acting in it. And then, like, I hope that if I put the name of the camera, at the time you would put the name of the camera in the title, like Panasonic TH4 short film, or like when I made a film in one shot, it was like one shot short film. And it was like, okay, you kind of watch it for the gimmick a little bit. That was the only tactics that we would apply. But now it's fun to live at this intersection of, like, there's art, but there's also tactics. There's thumbnail, there's title, there's building a good description to go along with it. I think Mr. Beast does some awesome stuff for the content he does. His editing style and like what you can learn from that, maybe it doesn't really apply to like where I'm at, which is you could call anything storytelling at a certain point, but it's like, it's very character driven. It's very documentary style content that I create, but I hate that sentence. I don't want to say that. I don't want to say content that I create. That's
You're a content creator. Just face it.
yeah. I'm a content creator. Anyway, I'm glad you didn't ask me my title. I don't even have a word for that right now. But
I just call you the. I just say you're the GOAT of running media. That's my official title for you.
I appreciate the GOAT. I wouldn't throw the GOAT on there, but yeah. I live at this fun intersection of endurance sports and cameras. That's basically the job at this point. But yeah, anyway, what I was saying is that like there is some. I think that's where the marketing side, going through this marketing program and stuff, was super valuable, and that also like scratched an itch that I didn't know I had. Was just like this. Okay, we make this cool piece of content. I spend 3 or 4 weeks living a film, day in and day out. I think that was the hardest part of making Choose Strong, was that I lived that film 8 weeks every single day. There wasn't a day that went by where I was not working on that film. We were under an intense deadline, and then watching the day after, there'd be no real follow-up on it after the release.
That's tough.
Was tough, but also like I had put that expectation on everyone else that they would care as much as I cared, and it's like, no, you were the one who cares. And so that's why this Cocodona film was so special to me, for sure, was that it was like, no one cares as much as you do. Okay, here are the controls. Like, here are the controls in front of you. And so that's, that was only possible because Sally and her husband, Eddie, who's like so involved in everything that we do, both of them trusted me. And if we hadn't built that trust, I wouldn't have said, give me the reins of like your first big branded documentary in a while that's going on your channel. But like, we built that trust. We'd done a YouTube series of 12 episodes. We'd grown a channel from 4,000 to 24,000 subscribers. And it was like, okay, I'd proven, I kind of know what I'm doing, or at least like I know enough to be dangerous.
Dude, didn't the one that performed better, didn't you edit that in like 2 weeks? Wasn't like a crazy fast turnaround? Yeah,
that was from the finish line to delivering that film was under 4 weeks. And that was like included like a week of it was done, but we were just rolling out the marketing material alongside the brand. And so, that was, I work really well fast. Like there's definitely an advantage to being fast. I think that I can churn out content, especially like long form storytelling, a little bit faster. Like a lot of people are used to a race film. It takes 6 months to come out. And I don't know necessarily if I can reach the standard of somebody who takes 6 months. If they had 6 months to focus on it, somebody else might be able to get there faster. Same with like, okay, if you sat down and you gave me and an experienced Hollywood DP, there are plenty of people who can outshoot me in a studio. All the lights that you need, you have a day to pre-light, you have sit-ins and all that kind of stuff, and then you finally get to the actual shoot. There are plenty of people who can outdo that. But when you're climbing Mount Whitney, when you're in the Swiss Alps, and you have to run up and you have to run down with the biggest athletes in trail running, like that's
wild.
I can be fast and I can adapt on the fly, and like I'm just leaning into, in this stage of my career, leaning into more of like, okay, this is really where I can make an impact, because I did the whole like shoot interviews thing, and like I figured out pretty well how to make a good looking interview shot. I still know there are people who can outshoot me with the right budget and that kind of thing, but at this stage, and editing too, right? That hit the right area where I could succeed. 3 weeks was hard, and I lived that film. I just quit my job. I was in the process of moving, and things were kind of like going a little crazy all around me, but it was like, okay, I knew that was also interesting. I knew there was another film that was being edited, and I was watching on Instagram that film being edited. It's all healthy competition. It's all healthy competition. I don't really know the guys who made that film, but I was like, we have to get this out a week earlier than we had originally planned, because they dropped their release date.
Dude.
And so now that film also did really well. That film now has more views than my film, but
Can we talk about that film?
Yeah.
What was it?
So there was another athlete out there. His name's Chad Wright. He's pretty well known in the endurance space. He has a great podcast. Like, super interesting guy. He and Sally actually have a lot of similarities in what they do, and so he also did the exact same race as Sally. Right. And I knew that both of these films were being worked on at the same time, and a little part of me just wanted to say, okay, we can, because I didn't know this other team that well. I wasn't familiar with their work. I was like, okay, with a couple extra weeks, maybe they'll probably make it better. But if I can get to that 90% point in 3 weeks, like, let's send it.
Dude, that's crazy. If you had the like ideal amount of time to edit one of those films, it'd be like 6 months, you think?
It's more about the ability to focus on the film than it is the amount of time. Like, I don't think I think my ceiling on a 40-minute, pretty condensed story, it took place over the course of a week. Yeah, like, I don't think more than 6 weeks is what I need, but those need to be focused 6 weeks.
Oh,
These
6
need to be
weeks.
6,
Okay.
Yeah, those need to be like 6 weeks of, I'm not going out and pitching new business, raising money for another film, going and shooting another film. If those are 6 focused weeks, that was the big thing. The only way that I made Too Strong in 8 weeks was that, like, that was my life.
Yeah.
That was it. I would run, I would edit that film, and I had a great team around me at the staff job that I was at, that they picked up the slack for me being locked in the closet for basically 8 weeks to make that film.
Dang. What do you know the view counts on those by chance? I'm really curious. Like the one that outperformed.
Yeah, I think Chad Wright's is somewhere in the 300,000-ish range, like, and Sally's film from Cocodona that I made is in the 250,000 view range. But
They did really well.
Yeah, they both did really well, and I mean, this is just an odd sidetrack to get down because I don't want to make it like a competition. They probably were not even paying attention to my film, which is totally fine. Like, I don't expect you to care about every single ultra film made from the same race that you're also making ultra film for. Like, I'm just a little weird like that. I think that's just where my mind goes. But I can celebrate that I blew away the client's expectation because there was a brand behind that. There was a household name, Camelbak, behind it, and we blew away their expectations. And so, like, I'm just, regardless of the view count, I'm just stoked on that.
That's sick. I think competition's healthy. Makes us better.
Absolutely.
For sure.
Absolutely.
So there's a healthy level of competition. Before, I want to definitely talk about all the running stuff, like how we got here, but let's just go back, sort of staying chronological, roughly. So after college, so you had the internship during college. They offered you the job. You didn't take it. And then where did you go after college? Yeah,
so I had talked with that production company, and then, things changed. All the people who had been there when I was there left. It was entirely new, and just like, it wasn't seeming like the right fit for me anymore, and the job offer wasn't really going to come together the way that I wanted it to come together. And so right after college, I did the, travel with friends, do a road trip, just stitch together a little freelance work here and there. And so I want to say it was so I graduated in May, and then somewhere around end of July, August, I started looking for a full-time job. And
what year is this?
This would have been 2018. I graduated in 2018.
Okay.
And so, end of that summer, I didn't feel confident going to freelance. I think I could have at that point. But the two things that held me back were, one, I did not have the money to invest in the equipment that I knew was necessary. I had done the whole, like, starve and struggle and figure it out with a DSLR that doesn't really meet your expectations, but I'd shot on these cinema cameras in college. I'd shot on cinema cameras at this internship, and I was like, this is the standard I want to get to. It was hard to go back. And also, I didn't want to just be scrapping together weddings. I didn't want to be scrapping together all this conferences and all this little stuff at that stage. I was like, I can always come back and do that later, but I want to go somewhere where I'm not going to be wasting time chasing down new business. And I want to instead be making a lot of work, because I know my hustle culture was big in that time, that like 2017, 2018, Casey Daily vlogs, that kind of thing. I definitely went through a period my junior year of college where, like, I was living into that, like, never sleep. And, like, I had like 3 jobs on campus, and I was working, basically another job for a club on campus, planning events and that kind of stuff. And I was just all the time. And I thought, I was like super unfulfilled by that, but I was making a lot of work. I was trying, I was failing, I was trying, I was succeeding, I was getting my name out there. And so I was like, okay, if I go to a full-time job, I'm not going to be tracking down new business. I'm not going to be wasting my time. So I can be super focused on shooting, editing, producing, like, make it, put it out. And so that led me to, I don't remember how many jobs I applied to. I'm not super great at applying to jobs because my strategy has always been, if they like my work, they'll hire me. And I also do really well I do well in an interview. I will say that. That's my one brag on myself. But I don't know how to sell myself other than, like, if you like the work, let's work together. If you don't like the work, I mean, I don't know what to do. But I walked into a full-time job right out of college. I think September 2018, I would have started that job. And it was a super unique opportunity because it was full-time, salaried. It was with a nonprofit that had 2 other staff, videographers. I mean, there was a 20-person marketing department. Like, this is I mean, they're not technically a large nonprofit, I don't think, but like it's a big mid-sized nonprofit. You know, that like 40 to 50 million annual budget size nonprofit. And so like it was an interesting place to go. I had been doing more of those nonprofit storytelling, like film with a purpose styled projects. And so it was a good match for me. That was also a place like I didn't know anybody. I didn't ask for recommendations or anything to get in there. I just sent in my resume at the time, which is pretty thin. I sent in a cover letter, which, I should dig that up and read that sometime. It's probably really bad. Again, like I don't know how to write it, but like I sent in a portfolio, and I remember the 2 pieces that they pulled out. One was one that I did with a friend that won a competition in college, and another was for another nonprofit that I worked at with this production company, and that was enough to get them to say yes to. Yeah, it was full time, it was salaried, it was remote before remote was cool because it was 2018.
That's nice.
Which was, pluses and minuses to that. And, interestingly enough, it was mostly editing focused. They were looking for just the way the team was built. There was a guy who would like only shoot. And then there was another guy who like shot and edited and also produced, directed, and handled like the marketing side. And he was like, okay, I want to like produce and like handle working with the marketing team, and we need an editor. So I walked into that position with editing, and I was clear up front. I was like, hey, like I can shoot too. And they were like, sure, okay, awesome. We can always use extra hands. And then I remember very quickly, so I was hired in end of August, early September. I moved to Richmond, Virginia soon after that. And then in December that year, we kicked off shooting my first short feature documentary. And at that point, I was like, it was no question that I was the director of photography for that organization just because of what I brought to the table.
Nice. Damn, what kind of work were you doing with those guys?
Yeah, so it's all sorts of different stuff. Like I will say, like my first full year there, first calendar year, 2019, I edited 143 different videos.
Oh my God.
And that's all across the board. So we made a 45-minute short feature documentary that unfortunately was killed before it came out, but I put all the work into that. And, that was 10 to 15 days of principal photography. That was 33 interviews. That was multiple states. Crazy production schedule.
Why they never release it? Was it like corporate kind of stuff?
that was my first introduction to you can make a good film and you can miss what somebody else wants. And when you're at the bottom, when you're an individual contributor, no matter how hard you want to sell it, the amount of time it would take to finish that film and the amount of time to re-edit it the way they want it are the same.
Jeez.
So that was, but yeah, like that was the big scale, right? 45-minute, and we did some 10 to 20-minute pieces. We did some, we were actually, so I worked in prisons a lot. It was a nonprofit that worked in criminal justice, and so we brought celebrities into prison. And so I would cut some YouTube, very YouTube style content with that. We would do conferences, and then there was a ton of just micro content. Mm-hmm. This was when I think Reels were just about to come out, and Facebook video was still big, and Facebook was really pushing video, and YouTube Shorts was still a couple of years away. But yeah, everything from like 60-second Facebook ad to, every week I was doing a 3 to 4 minute storytelling piece, and then there were some longer pieces. But man, the fact that you can, and this is what's so interesting now in the social media world, so much stuff ends up on Instagram. There are tags, there's descriptions, there's all that kind of stuff. Like I made so much work in Obscurity. Like I think my name is on 4 of those pieces that I made. And that 143 videos a year only went up from there for the next 3 years that I was at that job. I was there for almost 4 years. And my name was barely on any of it. Like I could show it. There was never a problem of like, oh, you want to post frames on Instagram? Sure, whatever. I didn't really use Instagram that much at that time, but like, you want to cut into your reel? Sure, whatever.
When you say your name wasn't on it, do you mean like you didn't have credit?
Yeah, there was no credit. There was, if it was posted on Instagram, there was no credit. There was no tag. If it was on YouTube, it wasn't in the description. There was no credits at the end of the video. But what I will say, I'm not saying that to be like, oh, I wish they credited me. I think there's an interesting discussion to be had there. But I got to make so much work in Obscurity that like what I took on by not getting the credit was also like, you just get to make these videos, and if things go wrong or it doesn't meet the standard, that's okay. But I also took wins in like optimization. I was building my own templates. I was building my whole like backend system to simplify every single step of pumping out these short videos. And yeah, were they amazing? No, but I got to develop those systems, which then I brought to my next job, and those systems, which I still use to this day, to like run and keep everything organized behind the scenes. And so I think there's something to be said for making content in obscurity, making content that you don't have to talk about and pretend to be excited about if you're not excited about. No, like you do it. And honestly, moving on fast too. Like we moved on so fast from projects. I mean, there would be projects I'd work for weeks and weeks on, and then we post it and we get excited about it. We talk about it in the Monday morning meeting, and then it's like, okay, Friday, another video comes out. And I'm sure you see that from a lot of people, maybe even people like in the creator industry, where it's like we're moving on, we're doing weekly videos or we're doing daily videos. Just that like make a lot of work, make it in obscurity. I wasn't really posting my work on Instagram. I wasn't really trying to be all that. I was just trying to figure it out and like get better at what I was doing at that stage.
Dude, that's a hard thing to do, is like detach yourself from like video editing or photography or any form of art, because that's what shooting and editing is. It's art. It's like you're putting your effort, your time and effort into something, your energy, and it's like your own creative spin on it. You're creating it, and then when it gets put out into the world, it's like it's a piece of you, I feel like. And so that can be hard if like somebody doesn't give you credit, or somebody just takes your photo and posts it. I'm so bad about tagging people like you for like photo credit, which is terrible because I used to get so butthurt when people wouldn't tag me. But it's like it's just like a piece of you, so it's hard to detach from that, I feel like. And then it's like you put out like the film where it doesn't even get released. You put all this work and energy into it, and then it just sits there on a hard drive and never gets to be seen. It's gotta be really hard to deal with shit like that.
Yeah, I mean, the film not getting released was a whole different thing. Like, that one still hurts, especially because as I look back, that was very much a moment in time in the state of Oklahoma where a lot of things were changing. And I remember the next year after we had canned that film, seeing like some of the stuff that film was talking about as like, this is coming down the road. And I was like, oh, this stuff is actually happening. Things are changing. And so that was really hard. But yeah, like, it's definitely a challenge to put stuff out, and for something like video and like being creative, that's just so core to who I am. Like, I just can't imagine a world where I'm not like shooting and editing, whether it's photo, video, whatever. I just can't imagine a world without that as part of me. But no, I think that's the business side of my mind, that marketing side, that analytical side, which says, okay, yeah, we didn't, because now, and that's an interesting pivot. Like, I spent 3 years and 10 months making content for a nonprofit that now, I mean, I haven't scrubbed it from the internet intentionally. Like, I haven't deleted it, but like, no one's looking at that to hire me now. Right. No one cares. Most people don't even know. Most people, like, I sat down at dinner last night with a friend of mine who I have shot multiple races with, who I've gone on runs with. And I was saying, yeah, like, I'm going on this podcast today. And I was like, yeah, I might bust out some prison stories. And he was like, what? I was like, dude, yeah, like, I've been to prisons all over the country. I've been on max security yards. I've been all minimum security yards, county jails, all this kind of stuff. It's like, what? Like, people now just like know me as the running guy, like the guy who shoots running. No, it wasn't Tyler. Tyler knows about okay. That. Tyler, a good friend of mine. I'm sure the first time, well, he was part of the whole hiring process. When I was coming from my old job to where I worked with Tyler full time for a little while. And, but yeah, like, now my website looks entirely differently. Like, I updated my reel a couple weeks ago. And
I watched it last night.
Oh,
it's so good.
Thank you. I hope you left a like. That really helps me out. Like and subscribe. Thank you.
Well, it was on your website.
So regardless, I hope that you liked and subscribed. It's very important for the
Can I do that on your website?
I'll build that functionality, and I'll talk to Squarespace about that. Just kidding, Squarespace, please stop spending money on ads. Anyway, love you, but let's see another.
They sponsor everything.
I've been paying for besides this. I'm paying since junior year of high school. Can I just opt out of the ads? Yeah. Anyway, that's a whole different thing. But yeah, like that reel, like, I just recut it, and the last stuff from my old job, from like that, like from prison, basically, the last stuff from prison got cut out of that, and that for sure was a moment where I sat with that file when it was exported, and I was like, wow, like, this is, and it's not in a weird like, I don't want anyone to know. Again, like I'm talking about it today because like that was so formative for me, and some of the projects that I got to be a part of absolutely changed my life, changed my perspective. Being a skinny little privileged white kid coming out of an expensive university and traveling into prison somewhere that I had never been before, working with people and working with stories that are so different from my own experience, and doing that right out of college when I'm still like figuring out what life is. I mean, man, and then starting to interview people who are younger than me and they're in prison, and that kind of like, I mean, it just reshaped my entire perspective on life and like opened my eyes to so much of even working with people on the outside, you know, families who have somebody incarcerated, kids who have somebody incarcerated in their lives, like that. Just because I'm not posting that work or I'm not actively looking for that work now doesn't mean that, I mean, I'm just so grateful that film, and especially nonfiction documentary film, lets you just explore and lets you learn about things that you never, like if I had not taken that job, I would have no idea about what goes on behind those walls, other than, you know, I wasn't shooting 60 days in kind of stuff where I don't know how much of that is real, where, you know, all these fights and this stuff like that, like I wasn't exposed to a lot of that like hardcore prison stuff. But in many ways, I think I got a truer look at like just like the everyday and the people who are there and are trying to do the hardest thing in life, which is you have lived your entire life up to this point one way, and now you know the only way to like stop you from coming back here is to live in a totally different direction.
Oh my gosh.
And I've watched it I worked on a documentary where we watched somebody who we followed for 2 or 3 years, and we watched it fail. We watched it all fall apart.
Jeez.
I remember getting that call of she's going back to prison.
Oh my gosh.
I remember sitting in that parking lot, and like that's perspective right there. And that's like, it's, I mean, that's also the risk, right, of documentary that you take, is that you can go into something and it can all fall apart.
And it's all real, obviously.
And it's all real. Yeah. It's not just, it's different when you're making it than when you're watching it. Like, right. I think for sure when you watch it, it's like, oh, okay, maybe you connect, maybe you don't, depending on where you are on the empathy scale, you may or may not. Like, I think that, I've definitely become more in touch, like emotionally with myself, like just working through. I mean, there's only so many times you can sit, and I got to work with a lot of great interviewers when I was just a camera operator. And then, you know, later on and in the past few years, like I've been that guy just like looking, interviewing, been less like behind the camera. And you can only sit with somebody for so long who's just brokenhearted and crying about their son or their daughter who's in prison. There's only so many times you can do that and not like have to like reevaluate a lot of things emotionally in your own life.
Dude, that's got to be so emotional. Like what was like well, first off, what were like the kind of themes of the documentaries? Was it like people trying to get exonerated or like wrongfully accused, like that kind of stuff, or what was a lot of it about?
That's a good point. No, we weren't like in that Innocence Project kind of vein, though. You know, no people there like love that kind of work. It was a lot of life change, life improvement, working with families and that kind of thing on the outside, and then also working on policy and working with lawmakers and that kind of thing, examining the situation. Like, are the people who are being sent to prison really, like, is the system helping them or is it hurting them? Those kind of questions were what we were exploring.
Have you, through all that, have you formed like your opinion on the prison system? Because it seems pretty broken from what I know.
Yeah, for sure. Like I've definitely seen shortcomings of the system, especially on the reentry side when people are coming out of prison. But like it's definitely, and I'm sure this is just part of getting older and maturing, right? Like it's much more of a gray area. Like I remember driving past like the county detention center as a kid, you know, and being like, those are the bad people. Yeah. Those are the bad people. And like, right, like it's a very natural, like, hey, if they're behind barbed wire and walls, they must be bad people. But then like you sit in there, they invite you into their space. They're open and vulnerable with you. You shoot the basketball with them, that kind of thing. You hear their story. And like, I'm not saying that like every single person behind bars isn't guilty in some way or that they haven't done something that needs to be corrected. But I'm also, you know, I've seen a lot more of the gray area of, just like these are humans, these are real people. And if your worst day was on camera, on a security camera, like would everyone say that you were innocent of everything? I don't know. Like, you know, it's a lot about asking questions. It's a lot about asking questions of yourself and your own experience, for sure.
Dude, that's an interesting way of thinking about it. I never thought about it that way. It's like, I mean, we all do illegal things every day, I think, or things that could potentially. I mean, there's like a meme about that, I think, of like the average person breaks like 17 laws a day without knowing it or something like that. But I'm like, I don't know. I've never thought about it that way. Definitely, I'm sure it makes you act in a more ethical, moral way. I feel like probably, right?
Yeah, I mean,
or I guess
I don't know if I could tangibly boil it down to like a way that I've changed in living my life, but like, yeah, for sure. I mean, there's definitely been moments that I've considered either in my past or since those experiences where it's like, yeah, like I see a lot more of the wrong place, wrong time.
Yeah. Things
where it's like, yeah, if I was doing this over there, or if I had stayed around longer there, you know, would I have gotten caught up in the wrong place, wrong time? Again, I don't want to paint that experience like my experience from prison. Like, yeah, again, there are people who are behind bars, who that's the place that they need to be, for whatever reason. But for sure, there are a lot of people who, and like I've gotten excited when people who I've met in prison have gotten out, and I get to celebrate 2, 3, 4 years down the line when they are doing well and they have a job and they're contributing to their family, they're contributing to society. And like, that's most of what I focus on too, is like just being able to celebrate one of my coworkers, you know, spent 10 years in prison for a very high charge. And, you know, getting to work with him was pretty special to be like, you would never know. So
he's a coworker. Then you got to.
Yeah. So he was a coworker of mine. Dang. Yeah. And you would never know. Just daily conversation, that kind of thing. Just normal guy. But he did time but it worked for him, right? Like,
dang.
It worked. Like, I think he would agree that maybe he needed to learn some things. But it worked. And yeah, that's another thing for sure my eyes were open to, is just like how many people around us have criminal records or have been justice involved, as the term goes. You know, there's a lot more people with those kind of backgrounds and a lot more barriers that are up for those people than there are for people like me who I don't have that.
Interesting. Yeah, that's got to be hard, like, especially with somebody you know. Like, my gosh. Yeah, that's wild. What are like some of the stories you remember? Like, are there any like very memorable moments from either funny or just, you know, sad, emotional, of any kind that's like, oh, wow, I'll never forget that? Because I feel like that's a very unique position to be in.
Yeah, and again, like, there's no like 60 days in. Like, I don't have crazy. As I think about it, it's like I don't have crazy prison stories. Like, yes, I remember a time where they locked down a unit right next to where we were, and I remember seeing the COs, the correctional officers, running through the halls with their hands on. I mean, it's not guns; it's less lethal stuff, but the less lethal's out. And I remember being like, "Hey, like, maybe we should go into this room for a little while because we're closing." It was in a county jail. Like, it was a rough place. I mean, I remember being on a yard at the height of the pandemic, and we had cameras, and, you know, we were shooting like a completely unrelated project. And I remember guys yelling to us from across the yard about, hey, there are people in here who are sick. There are people in here who are dying. You need to help us.
Oh gosh.
And, you know, I mean, I don't want to get into the pandemic and all that kind of stuff, but like, that prisons and jails is like where you're locked up and you have no choice of where you're going to go. You have no choice of who you're around. It was a really intense time to be in there, and I remember that. One funny story I will share is I remember that first big project we shot in Oklahoma. We were on a maximum security yard, and again, like, the guys who we were working with, this was specifically was in a men's prison, they're focused on life change, life improvement, that kind of thing. And we were shooting an interview with one guy, and, you know, they let us into the cells for this one, like, actually where they sleep and everything, which is not all prisons let you do that. And so we were in there, and I was setting up, shooting, like, getting audio ready and everything. I was like, oh, like, it's kind of noisy, like, you can hear everything out there. Like, I'll just, like, close the door, you know, whatever. Just because that's in, like, my film brain of like, oh, we need to get better sound. And so, like, we close it, and, like, I'm not stupid. Like, I know we're in a cell, so I'm like, oh, like, you know, it should just be able to rest close, right? Like, no, they're going to design a prison door to lock when it closes. And so by the end of the interview, we discovered we are locked inside this cell with this guy.
Oh, God.
And on the one hand, again, we're working with guys who, like, and I don't know what they would gain by, you know, doing anything out of the ordinary. Super nice guy. But then, right, like, I go back and, you know, I had this thing of like, I wouldn't read rap sheets. You never ask somebody in prison what they did. You know, that's a big thing you don't do, just out of respect, generally.
Right.
Like, you just don't want to get into that. But, you know, I remember looking up his rap sheet, and he's in there for triple murder. And I was locked in the cell with him. And,
Oh,
like,
my gosh.
that was for, I mean, how old was I? I was 21 at the time, for like a 21-year-old, again, like 21-year-old skinny privileged white kid.
With a
Locked in
nice
a cell,
fancy camera.
and then like with stuff, and you know, my coworker, writer, super talented writer who I worked with a lot, but like she's like not a big person herself, you know. But anyway, like that was just a moment where I remember sitting there afterwards and being like, oh, like that is just kind of a wild experience that I would never have imagined a situation I'd be in. Yeah, so that's kind of a lighter tone one.
How long were you in there for?
I mean, the interview was like 45 minutes.
And then how long after?
I mean, the door was locked the whole time.
What about after the interview?
I think we were able to get out pretty quickly once we realized. But like, yeah, like when you lock it in, like, do you like bang on the door to get them to open it, or is that a signal for like something's going wrong? Like, I don't know.
That's so crazy. Prison it's a whole other world that I feel like we don't even think about, and it's just there's all these like politics and like obviously gangs and like all this crazy stuff involved, and then like the project. Innocence Project, is that what it's called? Mm-hmm. Like that whole thing that shit's so sad.
Yeah.
Damn, what a crazy experience. You did that for 3.5 years?
Yeah, almost 4 years.
Do you miss it ever?
No. I think at first I did, because, you know, one of the perks was I traveled a lot. I traveled all the time, actually.
That's why you're a freaking, is it American Airlines? Like,
yeah, so like I had American Airlines high status for a while. I stayed over 100 nights in Marriott hotels, specifically one year that I was working there. Like I was, you know, some people say like, oh, I travel all the time. There was a 2-year period where it was like, I travel all the time. I fly 2 to 3 times a month because there was nothing local to me. Everything was flying. You know, for a while I was based out of regional airports. So that meant, you know, to get to LA or whatever, like that's at least 4 flights total round trip. And so like, yeah, like I miss the status a little bit sometimes. I mean, it wasn't glamorous travel though. Like we're flying to Oklahoma City, we're flying to Lincoln, Nebraska. Yeah. We're staying in the same chain hotels. We're booking one of the 2 rental car agencies that you can book because that's what our corporate policy is. And you're flying, at least, I mean, we flew the big real airlines. Like I don't become pretentious about my airlines and stuff. But like at a certain point, yeah, I mean, it's cool. It was really cool to be 22, 23, flying first class all the time across the country. But like, it does get old. It does get a little bit old. And so that was part of my move to Austin was like, all right, let's take a step back from that for a little bit, because I was unhealthy. I was eating out of gas stations or the hotel, you know, whatever they have in the fridge there. And it wasn't, interestingly enough, so I was traveling all the time. I wasn't super healthy. Like I would go to the gym once or twice a week at a Planet Fitness membership when I was home. But basically I was just surviving on like, my job's pretty physical. Like I'm walking around a lot. I'm on my feet all day, that kind of thing. And then travel went away because the pandemic hit. I remember the day that I canceled a trip because we had just come off of a shoot with the Cleveland Cavaliers. We brought them into a prison in Cleveland, which was super cool. And then I remember getting the call a couple days later of like, hey, the Cavs were exposed, you know, when the NBA was like shutting down, like that whole thing. And I was like, yeah, like we're probably not going to travel for a bit. So that turned into a month, and then it was like turned into 2 months. And I remember gaining 10 or 15 pounds. Like I'm not saying my wake up moment was like crazy. Like I was about to like die of heart disease or anything, because I'm still like only like, you know, 23, 24.
Right.
And
I mean, to gain it that fast.
But yeah, like in a couple of months, because no gym.
Yeah.
And the only thing sustaining my like ability to not gain weight was like, basically I was either sleep deprived or I was on my feet all day. That's where I found running. And that's one of the greatest gifts that job ever gave to me. Actually was the in-between time where travel was just shut down. Now we only had 3 months off, and then we were flying through the height of a lot of stuff. I was traveling all over the place through empty airports, empty planes, that kind of stuff. And that was wild. But running stuck. And I started running, and I would use that as a way to explore these cities and these towns and these places that I was going. Even if they weren't the most glamorous place, it was like, okay, cool. Like every place has got a park, you know, some kind of park, and I can go run the park. Or a lot of these towns have a river, and there's a river trail, you know, And so running became the way to explore, to see the new cities. And it also just became the perfect antidote to like, I'm staying inside my house or editing, or I'm like traveling, but our shoots are so much more locked down now. They're so much more complicated. And so like running was that like perfect balance, the perfect way to balance all of that out.
Dude, that's so cool. That's like honestly one of my favorite parts about traveling now that I've gotten into running is like going for a run in a new city. It's like, I don't know what it is. There's something about it. It's just, you're like exploring, you're seeing new things, and you're on your feet. So it's like, has that gratifying feeling at the same time. Side question. Did you ever go to any of the prisons or anything in Wyoming? You said Nebraska, and I was like, oh, I didn't realize you went that far west.
No, we never went to Wyoming. I don't know if that was... I mean, the nonprofit was active in most states. I don't know if Wyoming was just hard to work with cameras.
Probably.
Because there were some states where it was just like,
Yeah.
I mean, California was super hard to work with, you know. I mean, different states have different departments of corrections, and they all have their different rules.
And then another question I was curious about. You said you guys brought in like celebrities and stuff, like the Cavs. Who were like some of the notable people? I'm curious about that.
The most... That's a weird pause. Cut out the weird pause. So the most notable would probably be... actually, this was... I worked on the back end of this one. The shoot had already happened when I hired Grayson Boucher, also known as the Professor, famous street ball guy from the AM1 days. He's a YouTuber, Instagrammer. That video ended up doing 50 million views, so it's been seen by a lot of people. That was probably the most notable. And then there were most of the others were like music acts, that kind of thing, of varying. None of them were a huge deal, but like they were big enough that, you know, they were on tours and we would bring them in.
That's
But
cool.
yeah, the Cavs for sure was a big one.
Yeah, dude, it's always weird like meeting famous people. It's like we saw Ludacris on the beach in Kauai like 2 weeks ago, and he was just like with his family. Like I really wanted to be like Luda, but I was like, no, it's with his family, just leave him alone. But I was like, it's weird because like meeting famous people is so odd because they're like, you see them on a screen or whatever, and they don't feel real. But
especially when I think what's fun about video and film though is that like it's different when you have a job to do, because all the people, you know, famous of varying degrees who I've met through film and through video, like they respect that you have a job to do. And, you know, they'll just treat you like, oh, okay, we're working together on this thing. Like, let's get it done. Let's get this accomplished. You know, like I sat down and did an interview with, I'm going to blank on his name, but one of the hosts of American Ninja Warrior for a project. And super just personable guy. And like, he kind of got that we only had 10 minutes to do this interview. And I was like, handshake, mic him up, get it done, chat a little bit after. And, you know, I've just had those opportunities. And so it's cool to like, like on the beach, it's like, like, I don't know what to do. But yeah, and the other thing I will say that's fun about running too is that people are just so personable in running. Like I got a chance to meet Courtney DeWalter at UTMB this year, and we got to not just like weird on the street, like we hung out and chatted. You know, Sally is a good friend of Courtney's, and I was hanging with Sally and Courtney before press conference, and we just got to. It's just like we're all just hanging out, and we all love running. We all love being outdoors, and you know, we're all just living life and hanging out, and especially in running, I think it is like something about like chasing, you know, you're chasing this dream of like doing what gets you excited. And like for me, yes, running is, but I'm not going to be a professional athlete, but like I'm chasing after this like running media thing. And like when it's a bunch of people in the same room who are all chasing after their big goals, that's just a fun way to connect. And yeah, you realize that for the most part, I mean, I've never had well, that's not true. I have had some encounters where it's like, the person seems like they're a little too good to be here, but you know, for the most part, they're just ready to, and so many people, they just respect that. Like, if we all have a job to do, let's work together and get it done.
Yeah, I mean, you literally work with like, I would call Sally like at least in the world of running, like celebrity, famous person. Like,
I mean, you can't, like when we were at Leadville this year. I mean, I wasn't filming her this year. I filmed her last year at the Leadville 100, but you can't go anywhere in the town with her and expect to get anywhere on time because people stop her, especially in ultra running. She's just like such a great ambassador for the sport, and people know her. She's been around the sport for 10 years. She's just kind of like, I mean, she hasn't like transcended. It's not like an Eliud Kipchoge kind of like transcendent.
He's got to be one of the few runners that's like kind of becoming a household name now. Like, I mean, I don't know if maybe like Prefontaine, maybe, but even he's a little bit more, or less well known, I guess. But there's not that many runners because it's such a like niche sport.
Yeah, it is really a niche sport, for sure. But then, I mean, you have people like Courtney Dauwalter who, right. she's starting to cross over. And a lot of that is, I mean, press, like being on the Joe Rogan podcast and that kind of thing, like really launches you into more mainstream, more people who are just like interested in interesting people and not just interested in this niche sport of running on trails and running in mountains.
So where did we go after prison job?
So where did we go after prison?
A nonprofit. Where did we go after that?
Yeah, so I got to a point, this would have been 2022, early 2022. I was so burned out of my job. I was still producing at this high output. We weren't really getting a lot of help. I was no longer the limitation on the team, and that was really frustrating for me. Like, I can work on a team where it's like, I need to work harder and improve myself, but when it becomes like, there are other things that are holding me back. And also, like, I was getting exhausted of going to show up to prisons, all my gear ready to rock and roll, and they would just throw restrictions on you that you can't do anything about. You can't film. I would show up to an event. I would fly across the country. I would skip family events. And they would show up and say, hey, yeah, you can't film any faces. You can't show any, you can't show any fences. You can't show any towers, guards. So I'm like, okay, so I can film the person who's speaking to the crowd, and that's it. Like, we brought Miss America into a prison, at the time, Miss America. And we got in there and it was like, yeah, you can't show any faces. And I just got tired of, and then I go back to my boss and it's like, wait, why does the footage look this way? Can't we see that? And I'm like, no, sorry. Like, whether it's my fault or whether the prison just changed the rule, or it was almost never my fault. It was like either somebody miscommunicated or the prison changed the rules. And it's like, and so I was getting tired of that. I was getting burned out. The travel was really upending my life. It was getting in the way of, I mean, I was trying to care about running and trying to get better. And like some days it was just like, we were flying and going crazy. I'm like, I couldn't train in any sort of a consistent manner.
Yeah, that's hard.
And so at that point, and also like, running was becoming more important to me. I was a fan first, for sure, like before I even shot anything related to running. And I was applying to jobs that were in sports and athletic performance related to filmmaking and content. And I was just trying to figure out, like, how do I pitch myself? I'd never shot running. This is 2022 for context, February, March, April. And never shot running, never shot sports. Like, I shot like kids sports camps, which is like this is not high octane adventure sports at all. And so,
like youth soccer, that kind of deal.
Yeah, exactly. Like that kind of stuff where it's just like, I mean, there was one documentary project where I remember, and this was before I got into running, where there was like a running scene and like I couldn't keep up because I wasn't in shape at the time. But anyway, oh man, I wish I could reshoot that project. I could kill that one right now. Anyway, I'm not good at leveraging connections. I'm not good at like networking and that kind of stuff. And so I sent a DM to the media director of Bare Performance Nutrition, Jordan Utter, great guy. But like, he didn't know me. I didn't know anybody who worked there. And he didn't follow me back on Instagram. Like, I just saw he posted like, we're hiring a creative. Like, it was a very like generic, like creative. And I was like, oh, I am creative. I like the work. I had seen BPN's work. I knew some of the documentaries they had done. I was like, okay, this is cool. Like, this is sports, this is running, but it's also documentary and storytelling. I'm like, okay, documentary and storytelling, I have that locked down. Maybe I can convince them that, like, if you give me a shot, I can figure out the whole, like, running part. Like, I can figure that out. But I have what I think, I genuinely do think is the more complicated part is the documentary, is the storytelling.
For sure.
And also working really well within a system, a team. I have all those things down. I can figure out the running. And so that was kind of my, I don't want to say that was kind of my last ditch effort before I was like, just going to like quit my other job and just like, because I was at that point, I was just over it. We were just doing the same thing. There are all these limitations. I was like, okay, I'll either get this job at BPN or I'll quit my other job and I'll figure it out. And things came together. It made sense for me to come to BPN. I had to move pretty quickly. I've moved a bunch. Like I've lived in Virginia. I've lived in a couple different places in Pennsylvania. I've lived in Phoenix, Arizona. And so moving to Austin, a little north, Round Rock here, that was not like crazy for me on 3-week notice. I could pack up the car. I could drive. Yeah. I could figure it out. Yeah. And so I moved, and like for sure, some of the things that appealed to me, like definitely were the subject matter. It was also like, it seemed like I could take a step back from traveling. I was ready to commit to moving here for 2 years because I was like, I feel like I was moving every 9 to 12 months.
Right.
Just a new place, like never setting down roots, never developing community. And I was like, okay, we'll take a step back from the travel. I'll take this on for me, it was like a prove it deal. I don't know if it was for them, but for me, it was like a prove it deal of like, you can do the one half, you can do the documentary, you can do the storytelling, you can do the system, you can do the work fast. We got to figure out running. We got to figure out, there was also other stuff, shooting CrossFit, shooting weightlifting, all that other stuff. I was like, okay, I just need a shot. I can figure it out.
How did it pan out?
Yeah, I mean, it worked. I mean, I don't want to say like I came in and I was the best ever. Like there were growing pains, and I got to, they set me up really well at BPN to be behind the scenes a little bit, like assisting, like B camera. I was already right into editing because I can edit whatever. Like it's not hard to edit whatever. I've edited every possible subject material ever. Honestly, at this point, like, but. Yeah, I was able to be behind the scenes a little bit, ease into it, and then kind of across the desk came this project with Sally McCrae, ultra runner, BPN athlete, Nike athlete, veteran of the space. She had a project she was doing where she was going to be doing 5 races in 81 days, running a lot of miles all over the country, and that project came to BPN. BPN was interested. Tyler McCain, good friend of mine at the time, coworker. He'd been there for a little while longer, so senior coworker of mine, got given that, and then I think it was 10 days before the first race. It might have been less. Might have been a week before that first race with Sally. It was kind of like, okay, like it's you and Tyler. Like I was going with him, and I was like I knew who Sally was. I had followed her. Like I had watched the films that she had been making over the years with her good friend Billy Yang, who's like Billy's an icon.
Yeah.
He's iconic, and like, oh dude, it was such a full circle experience at Tahoe 200 this year. Like I'm finishing up that film that we shot with Sally, and like Billy's in the credits because he was pacing her. He flew the drone and like gave me drone footage, and
so
he like
sick.
and it was like such a full circle moment to be like, dude, like I've watched every single one of your films. Like you were the guy who like that was my introduction to ultra running, was his films. Anyway, but yeah.
He's like the OG of trail films and trail documentaries, I feel like.
Yeah. Oh, for sure. Yeah. And I mean, he's been at this for
Yeah.
at least 10 years. It might be more than 10 years. Like he has just been working. And yeah, I mean, he's iconic in the space. But yeah, so I had this opportunity to work with Tyler, especially to work with Tyler on this. I mean, it wasn't just like I was going in on my own. It was like, okay, I've never really shot running on my own. Like I've been on shoots where there's been running. Like I've been like a B camera operator, like getting, or like specialty camera, or like flying a drone, was like whatever. But like this is like, okay, we came on board with 4 races to go. It's like, okay, like this is going to be the next couple months. It's like, okay, we're going to edit a documentary. It's like, okay, we're going to do same day edit video from these races. And it was straight into the fire. And I mean, truly, so that project, Sally called it the True Strong Project. That was her name for it, and True Strong became the name of the film. And that is, like, I'm not one of those people who goes back and, like, watches their old work in either way, like, either to, like, make fun of it or, like, to just, like, relive the glory. Like, generally, it's, like, there are a few projects that, like, every 6 to 8 months, I'll browse on by. Or like if I'm with my friends from high school, dude, we've sat down and watched our films from high school. And like we'll just have a good time, enjoy it.
Dude, that's one of my favorite things ever.
It's so much fun. It's so much fun. But like there is, and this is going to be weird, and this is going to be vulnerable. This is a podcast exclusive, is that I watch Too Strong once every couple of weeks.
Really?
And I have unintentionally sat down and watched the whole thing through because I genuinely think that was the project that my entire life up to that point had led up to. And it's like, it's so cool to look back at that experience and the intensity of that experience. I mean, we took it on, I found out in August, and we delivered the film in December.
Jeez, that's wild. Dude, it's so good. You guys did such a good job.
Yeah, and it's actually, it's been a year since, I think it's a year today or maybe a year tomorrow since we wrapped shooting at the summit of Mount Whitney. Well, I guess we wrapped at the bottom, but we Tyler summited Mount Whitney. I summited Mount Whitney along with Sally, who did it twice. Yeah, and like genuinely that film, like, do I think it's the most like singular transcendent piece of work made in the running space? No. But when I watch it from my perspective and I can see all the years of like developing documentary, developing storytelling, I see me finding running in that story. I see like, I mean, Sally's story of her mom and her childhood and everything is just like so unbelievably tumultuous and heartbreaking. Yeah. But like, I also came to grips with so many things that I went through in my childhood that I've been trying to figure out since then. And like, even I had, and I've shared this on Sally's podcast, and I'll share it here too. I had the worst panic attack of my life before climbing Mount Whitney.
Really?
I've always been an anxious person. I've struggled with that. Like, I know it's come out in different ways in my family for sure. I'm not the only one who struggles with it, but I had the worst panic attack of my life. And that left me, I mean, the funny part of the story that I tell is that like, oh, I did Mount Whitney on like half a gel and a bunch of pretzels and like just some water. But that was because like I was physically unable to eat because I was so gripped by this fear of, I knew that this whole film like hung on, can you follow Sally up this mountain? Can you get the shot? Can you go over? I had never been over 12,000 feet in my life. Can you go to 14,500 feet, still film? Can you finish this project that you have been working on for all these weeks? And I think that in that moment, and like we were sleep deprived, I was like losing my mind. I was stressed. I stressed so bad on these ultra, like I just always like, I can't sleep. I'm like, are we going to miss her or something like that? But like all of that built up to like, I experienced the worst panic attack of my life. I remember sitting in a motel parking lot, like dizzy, sweating, dry heaving, like unable to see straight.
Oh my gosh.
And Sally was in the motel room. And then I remember like standing up and being like, something's really wrong. Okay, we have to keep shooting. It was unbelievable. But like, I see all of that when I go back and rewatch it.
I'm
like, this truly was, and I hope it's not like the biggest project I ever make. The one project, maybe it'll be the one project I ever remember for it. I don't know. I'm not concerned with that right now. What I know right now is that like, man, that was such a milestone. And that project ended up being kind of the launch pad to where I'm at now a year later, for sure.
Dude, I had no idea about that. I knew you told me about like, oh, I did Mount Whitney with like, half a gel or whatever it was, but I didn't know it was because of that. That's crazy.
Yeah. Well, but it was also, I mean, the redeeming part of that too, which I will say is that like I got to the bottom of Mount Whitney and I remember, well, I think it was the day after because like we kind of had to like, we just like, both Tyler and I were just spent at the end of that. I think it was the day after. And I remember looking back at like the photo of me at the summit and I remember crying and being like, that was the hardest thing I've done in my life. And like, I have now figured out that I can do that. So like, what else can I do? And that was just one of the coolest realizations, like one of those self-actualization kind of moments where it's like, man, like I've really explored the hardest thing to this point. Okay, so we can probably keep going. Like, there's so much more to do.
That's so cool, man. And I think one of the craziest parts about like what you do is that like, especially if you compare it to like the prison stuff, is like prison or any other like regular documentary. Typically, you just show up, you have your camera, pull up in a car, you film, you leave. But like ultra running, like you have to hike up a freaking mountain, up Mount Whitney to 14,000 feet. Like not only like Sally's doing it, and that's great and hard, but you're also doing it at the same time, carrying a camera. Like you're basically doing what a lot of these like athletes are doing, but you're like you don't get any recognition for it because you're behind the camera and you're carrying a camera. It's like, I don't know. I think it's so wild. And then it's like one of the coolest art forms I feel like too, because you put in this like crazy physical effort to capture the footage, and that's only half of it. Then you got to go back and edit it and piece it all together. It's like there's just so much that goes into it.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think one of the things, and I mean, the athletes that I get to work with are so far beyond, my capacity at their height. Like Sally did it twice. Like, I don't think I was going up Mount Whitney 2 times. Like, there's a good thing that Tyler did one, I did the other. But I think that there is this level of respect that you get to when you're filming these athletes, when you're in it with them.
Yeah.
And they see that you are also working hard, that you're not just like meeting them at the aid station and you film them as they sit in a chair and then you get a drone shot as they leave, and like just kind of applying like, yeah, that whole like show up, set the camera, And then you go to the next one and you're sitting on the tailgate, like drinking a beer. Oh, I guess they're going to be in here. Like, no, like I think that there is a level of respect that's developed for, again, and I don't want to compare myself to like these professional athletes, like me chasing Jim Walmsley at UTMB this year for a half a mile, 3/4 of a mile is nothing compared to the effort that he's putting out.
Right.
Then there's so many cameras around him. I doubt he has an idea who I am, which is fine. Jim, let's be friends. You're awesome.
He's a savage, dude.
Oh my gosh. So I mean, so inspiring to watch these people at the top of their game,
right?
Like just pushing through. But yeah, like there is a different connection level when it's like, okay,
right,
we're in this together. Or even like, you know, I'll do little shoots with athletes and it's like they're just doing a track workout and I'm just getting clips while they do their workout. We're not even doing anything too contrived. And it's like some of them kind of get when I have my cinema camera, my FX6, and I'm running behind them on a rep and, you know, okay, yeah. I mean, if it was Usain Bolt, I'm not keeping up. But like somebody who's doing like 520 pace repeats, like I can keep up for 100, 200 meters with a big camera. And like I think there is just that different level of connection that's from that rather than like, oh, I'm on an e-bike or oh, like, you know, these different ways. Like not that there's anything wrong with as long as you're getting the shot, you're getting the shot. Right. But especially when I'm trying to build these long-term relationships and when I'm trying to lean into like what is the one thing that I can do that makes me different. Again, it comes back to like, yeah, put me in a studio. There are a lot of people who can outshoot me. Like, again, not to come back to the e-bike thing, but like, yeah, like there are plenty of people who like can e-bike with a phone gimbal better than I can. Right. Probably they can probably get the shot faster than I can that way. But like, what is it that I can lean into that only I can do, or only a small group of people? I also don't want to say that like I'm the only person. Like Tyler McCain, who I work with, is an incredible athlete. Like there's a reason he did Whitney first when Sally was fresher.
Yeah.
Like, and that's because he's so strong. And there are also like at UTMB this year, I met some incredible filmmakers who were like out there just crushing it in the Alps, and that's so rad. It's very flat here in Texas compared to the Alps. I need to get my mountain legs, but you know. Yeah, it's just fun to lean into that as much as I can.
Well, I think one of the coolest parts about running media and like running storytelling too is like running, I think, provides like a kind of a blank canvas, and then it's like that's where you lay in the storytelling. Like you can be so creative with it compared to other things. It's like a lot of other, I don't know, a good example, like I don't know, weightlifting or something, where it's like you're kind of focused more on like what they're doing, but with running, it's just like you can't just show somebody running for 45 minutes. Like it's so boring. It's the same thing over and over and over again. But it's like, how do you bring that to life and like tell the story? And that's what you guys do so well. It's like True Strong and like even the Cocodona, where it's like you call it like a race recap essentially. But it's like there's still a story to it. It's like you're not just showing her running for 45 minutes. It's like there's so much else involved with it. And I don't know. It's cool. And I'm so surprised that you were so into like the fiction stuff. And now all you do is nonfiction, like documentaries essentially. Do you think you ever want to go back to like doing nonfiction and writing that stuff and shooting that? Or you want to stick with nonfiction stuff, like documentary style?
You know, just like I think when I found running, for lack of a better way to put it, scratched an itch for me. The gym never did. Like lifting, well, all that stuff, like that never really did. Like cycling has never really scratched that itch for me. Like I get bored doing that, but like running scratched that itch. I think for me right now, like I've thought about that. I think about that all the time, like narrative stuff. Like I have friends who are in the narrative world and I see the stuff they're doing. I'm like, oh, that's cool. I just don't, for me right now, like that's not, I don't think that would scratch the itch that I have for working with athletes, filming endurance sports. It's not just running. I'm trying to like not also just do running yet. Like I filmed gravel cycling this year, and that was a totally different experience. That was rad. I'd love to give that a shot. Maybe that would work for me for cycling. Maybe that would keep me more occupied. I just get bored on the bike. Anyway, but yeah, like that. Maybe someday we would explore the narrative. Like of course I wouldn't rule it out. I would love to. Yeah, like shooting a feature would be fun. Because a feature film, I think, has that same, like a lot of these shoots are trending more towards expeditions, what I do. Mm-hmm. I don't want to, I've been doing a lot of them this year, but it's like, I mean, when we went and filmed, Tyler and I, we shot a project in Vermont with Adidas Terex, and we were out there for 10 days. I think we were living out of a van for 8 of them. Like, we're not showering, we're not doing anything. Like, they're not like, I mean, Jimmy Chin is an icon too, and somebody who I look up to a lot for sure. And like, I'm not quite on that like Everest level of like you are really just like tense backpacks for weeks and weeks. But like, it's starting to get there. It's getting away from. It's definitely not a studio. 100-miler seems fast compared to some of these 200 plus, almost 300-mile efforts. And I think that a feature film might end up like intersecting with that someday, like that long, prolonged focus, working in a team, working with a crew. You're all just focused on this goal, and like those can be weeks and weeks. Granted, most of them you're not living out of a van. If you're shooting a feature, you know, you probably have some creature comforts, which would be nice.
That'd be so sick. How do you define feature film?
I mean, like feature film is those like 90 to, I don't know. The Academy probably has it like locked in, but like those like it's a longer narrative film. But yeah, I would say like 90 minutes plus. You know, something that's going to take 4+ weeks.
Like one of those like Teton Gravity research kind of films, or like the North Face
I'm thinking
films.
more like narrative too. Yeah, I mean like the North Face films, like those are amazing. Like I would love to work on something like that. But I'm thinking about like when I was a kid, like Lord of the Rings, I love the movies. I also love the behind the scenes. Like I watched those behind the scenes, and they were shooting for months and months. Yeah. And I was just like, wow, that's cool to be a part of a team and a crew that you just like are so locked in and you're focused. I think that was one of the things too that eventually like kind of took me away from staff jobs. Was I was like, it always felt like the focus was drifting. You just have so many deliverables. It's like one thing here, one thing there. Whereas like now, I mean, yeah, I probably have too many different little projects going on at once to like really devote singular focus to any one of them. But I get to be a little more selective. I get to be a little more, I mean, when I made that film at Cocodona, like, like 3 or 4 weeks after, I didn't really take on a whole lot of other work. And that was because I knew that I needed to focus. And so I love that. I think that's when a project is its best, is when you are focused on it and when you're really just like locked in on this is the thing, we work on it, we accomplish it, we get to the goal. And so that for sure with like a narrative feature film is definitely appealing. Like that whole like we're just locked in and focused and living it every day.
That'd be so sick. Has there ever been like a feature film on running or trail running? Like, I mean, I'm sure there is out there, but like, I feel like there's so much potential for, what is the Free Solo with Alex Honnold? Like that style of film where it's like, you know, super high budget, all these cameras, all this crew, all this stuff, but it's like for trail running. Has there ever been anything like that?
In fiction or nonfiction? You're thinking nonfiction.
I'm thinking nonfiction.
Nonfiction.
Yeah.
Yeah, the budgets really aren't there. To be honest, for most of that, but not really. I mean, there hasn't been like I even think like a 14 Peaks. 14 Peaks?
Oh, yeah.
There hasn't really been something to that scale to hit the mainstream. Like the most mainstream, I mean, again, hey, this is where my weak knowledge of film, maybe I'm missing something, but like, I think about like the most mainstream thing that hit was The Race That Eats Young. The Race That Eats Young, the Barkley Marathon doc that went on Netflix.
I actually haven't seen that one.
Yeah, so it's now free on YouTube. You can watch it.
Okay. I've seen the Gary Robbins one.
Yeah, which I think is I think that's a better film, honestly, especially if you go in not knowing the ending, for sure. So that's also cool. Like running just has so much just media that's like on YouTube, that's on Vimeo, that's on a brand's platform.
I feel like it's really getting there. Do you think it's getting there? Like, do you think at some point there'd be like a Netflix documentary? I guess there was, but like a mainstream one, or maybe it goes into like theaters or something, like Free Solo did with like rock climbing. Do you think there could ever be something like that with trail running?
Oh, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, trail running's coming more into the. I mean, running is just so in, right? Yeah. Like even what you do, I don't think would be possible 5 years ago. Like Definitely. To be like, just like I'm a running content creator. I mean, we saw somebody like Ryan Trahan try that years ago, and like. It kind of worked, but then he figured out other ways to like actually make being a content creator work. But like now maybe there would have been an opportunity for him to just do running, and running is just like so in. I think that out of the past few years, a focus on health, a focus on, even just people shifting to remote work has made running more popular and more accepted. It's not just like weird. Like I think back to high school, I was like, well, the kids on the track team are weird. They're wearing their shorts and they run around in a circle for fun.
They're also skinny.
Like, they're also, they're all just like so skinny. I mean, granted, I was super skinny at that time too, but I'm like, dude, you're wearing 2-inch shorts? That's weird.
Yeah.
Now there are Instagram reels that Jeremy Miller has posted of me wearing shorts with a split that goes all the way up. There is no hiding behind that, and that's just normal and acceptable, and nobody thinks twice about it. So yeah, I definitely think that there would be an opportunity, especially Netflix too. The way that streamers have changed and the way that their streamers are investing in original content.
Yeah, and
at a certain point, you run out of like. I think the Tour de France Unchained documentary series that just came out, like, I think it's only a matter of time. Now, granted, it's going to take a little while,
right.
But I think it's only a matter of time until we see something like that, just because ultra running is, people who see it are fascinated by it.
Right.
Like, I remember hearing about a 100-mile race for the first time. I was like,
yeah.
Okay, so people regularly die doing this, right? Like, this can't be normal. Or, like, how do you train? Do you just, like, run 100 miles every day until you run it faster?
Yeah.
I just I couldn't wrap my head around it. And that's like kind of how I'm wrapping my head around 200-mile races, where like I still don't understand. Right. Like, you did not sleep for 3 days. Did you, like, do people die? It's a very, very similar kind of feeling. But like, I think that so many people have experienced that, like, how is this possible? Right. And yeah, I'm sure it's only a matter of time.
Maybe you'll be the one to shoot it, direct it.
Hey, I am ready. My phone, I don't block any calls, just Netflix.
Surely there's a Netflix executive listening to this.
I'm ready. I'm ready whenever the call comes.
So, okay, let's go back a little bit. Yeah. You finished up the Choose Strong project. Where do we go from there?
Yeah, so finished up Choose Strong project end of 2022. Took a couple of weeks off just because of the intensity of that, and then came back in. Was still working a staff job at the time at BPN. Was still running, and Sally approached me over the winter, and she was like, "Hey, like, I'm gonna do these 200-mile races, and I want to do a YouTube series on them." I was like, "Awesome! Like, let's do it. I love YouTube." I've been looking for a way to get more involved on the YouTube side, because I wasn't really involved in that too much at my full-time job. And so I was like, okay, we'll do that. And then she was like, hey, we can, like, let's do a film on Cocodona, because we work really well together. We understand each other pretty well, and she gets to, like, Tyler and I. She's very comfortable working with us. And that's a big thing with these things, is that especially when you're going into these races and you're going to end up in some, like, pretty, like, rough, vulnerable situations when like things are falling apart and you're throwing up off the side of the trail. Like, you want people who you can trust, right, for sure. And so eventually, I'm probably late to going freelance. Like, I probably could have gone freelance before this, but I was very committed to I want to do it at the right time. And then this Cocodona project with Sally, and then there were other things for this summer. She's doing 4 200-mile races. We were talking about films for all of those. There was Western States that came across my calendar. I was like, okay, we can go to Western States 100. We can go to Unbound Gravel. We can go to UTMB, and we can work at all of these races. And it kind of got to this critical mass of, like, I think I sat with it and said, I can always go get another staff job. I'm not ruling it out that I wouldn't go back to a full-time job. Like, there's lots of life left to live. There's lots of life circumstances that can change, but I don't have dependents on me right now. Like, I'm not necessarily tied to a location. I can travel whenever I want, like those kind of things. And there was just a critical mass of projects that I wanted to work on that I wasn't sure if we're going to come around again. Yeah. Like, I know that 4 200-mile races in a year with an athlete who I can consider a friend of mine, I don't know when that's going to come around again. And so I said, you know what, like, it seems to be the right time. Yeah. And so, all good things. Like, I still have friends over at BPN and they've, supported our Tahoe 200 kind of. We did some content for them, and it was kind of a handshake on the way out of the door. And yeah, I left my job on a Friday, and I want to say, or maybe it was I think it was a Friday. And then, like, the next Monday I was in Arizona shooting Cocodona 250. Yeah.
Damn. That's sick. Dude, I think it's definitely scary leaving a job. Like, the security, the pay, the consistent pay, the benefits. Going into the unknown of freelance or self-employment is tough. It's very hard.
Yeah, and I was super fortunate, to have made that decision on my own terms. I know not everybody gets gets that like decision point. I was also super fortunate too. You know, I lived at home for a year and a half before I moved to Austin, and that enabled me to save up enough money that I was like, okay, I have some runway. I have some runway if things fall apart. Because like, yeah, I left and there were a lot of dates on the calendar, but we were still kind of hammering out budgets, hammering out like, was it going to work? Like, you know, I had to go buy my first big boy camera, my first cinema camera. And I was like, okay, this is a serious investment.
Yeah.
Like this is the cost of a small used car that I'm putting into this little box with a little window that creates images that you can then view on a computer. A very simplified version of cameras there. That's about all I understand about what goes on. But, you know, it for sure, yeah, it was absolutely a risk. But I was in a fortunate position. Yeah, and I think that's just the way that I process things. You know, I don't always necessarily respond in the moment and have the right answer, but like I can sit with things and think about them and come back with the right answer. And I think that was it with freelance. Again, like, and I have so much respect for people who jump in. They just jump in and do it.
Yeah.
But for me, I needed to sit with it, wait, and get the right opportunity.
Have you been happy with the decision to leave and to like go out on your own and like be able to pick and choose projects and be dependent upon yourself?
100%. Yeah. I mean, there have been serious growing pains, especially on the business side. Like, I think I was a little bit cocky about how well I understood the business side, and I'm still really figuring that out. But no, it became very clear to me that the office was just not somewhere that I worked well in. I don't think that an office environment really supports creatives who have to work in the field. It could work for maybe somebody who just has to be creative on the computer, but when you're shooting and you're traveling in the country, and I remember coming back from Switzerland, having not slept in about 2 days, I remember falling asleep at my desk because I thought it was expected that. Well, there was just no structure for an office. How does an office play with, like, you shot a race where you're shooting for 24 hours straight, and then you flew back across the world? Like, there was just no structure for that, and it just doesn't play well with an office. So that for sure, going out on my own and setting my own schedule, and I'm self-motivated enough that I can make it work. Yeah,
that is an interesting point of like the creatives need like freedom for sure, like of any kind, whether it's digital design, like graphic design, or video editing, or drawing, whatever it is. It's like it's such a unique like craft that you have to have your own freedom to like explore that and you know, go into a space where you're comfortable and like you can extract that. Like, have you ever read The War of Art?
The War of Art, no.
By Stephen Pressfield. Oh, it's so good. He talks. You'd enjoy it. I'm gonna butcher it, but he talks about like the muse. Like, we all have this thing in us. Like, or I can't remember. Shit, I'm not even gonna try to explain it. But basically, his thing is like, if you show up to this space every day, you can like extract something out of yourself. But like, you have to find what that space is, and it's like sometimes you gotta change up the space. That was a terrible explanation of the War of Art. But
it's similar to Stephen King in On Writing. He's like, like, I sit down at my desk, and sometimes I forget whether it was I think it's he sits until he gets a certain amount written. Yeah, and he's like, I don't care if it's the best, I don't care if it's the worst. Yeah, but like, I make that appointment, and you know. I don't know if, you know, you could read that the other way and say, well, you need to sit in the office and do it that way. Yeah. I think what it got to for me was, and I also experienced this with traveling so much my other job, like, it just wasn't compatible for the intensity of some of these shoots. Like, if I went for 10 days to Vermont and I was like, oh, well, you were there on Saturday and Sunday, so you get 2 days off. Like, my sleep schedule from having slept, you know, 4 hours in 5 days, or actually, I think we slept a little more. I think we probably slept like 7 hours in 5 days. Like, my sleep schedule is not going to be fixed within those 2 days. Honestly, I'm still probably dealing with some issues related to the sleep.
That'll mess you up, dude. Because
it messes you up. But like, that level of intensity is just not going to be compatible with an office. Right. And like, I think that's the way that a lot of the industry is going. Like, the in-house for sure is an affordable way to do it. It's a convenient way to do content. But there's a reason that you see big brands like the North Face or like Camelbak or something else. They have producers in-house. They have people who like kind of facilitate the marketing and the management, and then they bring in the creative team who can really dedicate a week in the field shooting or 6 weeks in the edit. I think that model is just makes so much more sense. Yeah. What's been your favorite? Well, actually, before I ask that, do you have any like
things you do to like tap into creativity? Like, say you're stuck in an edit on something, because editing can get just like brutal on your mind. Like, if you're ever stuck on something, do you have like things you do? Do you have like a ritual or like habits that you do to like just make sure you're staying sharp and like staying creative?
I mean, definitely I will just start to throw things in a timeline and be like, let's get close, or like, let's just pull out the best points and like throw them together and see what happens. The other thing that I'll also try for sure is like, okay, what is the moment or the emotion or the, you know, the pull and release of conflict that I want to happen? Like, let's just focus on that one thing and just see if we can make it work. For sure, that's a strategy. Another strategy too is like, hey, if there are films or things that I enjoy, let's go back and rewatch it. Let's go frame by frame for a minute. Like, or let's just like rewatch a scene or two here or there. Let's study how the music plays in and that kind of thing. And like really pay attention to all the little stuff just to get my head again, thinking about not just like, if you'll get overwhelmed by the whole piece.
Right.
Like, it has to be 45 minutes and all this stuff. But if you go and you just remember, like, well, I mean, we have to build the building blocks somehow. Like, I definitely got stuck on this Tahoe 200 film.
When does that come out?
For a while. So that's coming out next Friday from today. So that's the first
25th.
The first Friday in October, is that? Yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'll be the first Friday in October.
Nice. So by the time this comes out, people can watch that.
Yeah, so by the time it comes out. But like, yeah, like I definitely got stuck on that, and I needed to settle on I need to just start putting the building blocks together and like really just break it down to little moment. And then you build those little moments and then you stitch them together.
Do you, how do you go about, like, for Tahoe, for example, like how many hours of footage did you have from Tahoe?
I mean, we shot for 4 days. It's a good amount of footage.
How
there
do
was
you-
a bunch of GoPro footage, just a bunch of interviews. There are a couple hours of interview.
Dang.
Because I do pretty long interviews for sure.
Not to go into too much detail, like how do you go about taking 4 days of footage and condensing it into like 45 minutes? I feel like a lot of people would be curious about that.
Yeah. For me, so I think editing interviews is my superpower. That's another thing that I will unashamedly claim. And when I edit interviews, there's just something in my brain like connects with, like, I can just start to organize stuff. I listen to everything at 2x speed. I do occasionally do transcripts as well, just to like, especially a long form interview, you need transcripts.
Yeah.
And I go through and I mark stuff and I chop stuff up and I start to organize by whether it's theme or with the races, like there is a logic to it where it's like, okay, these parts go towards the beginning, these parts go towards the middle, these parts go towards the end. And then I start building from those building blocks and chaining stuff together. Yeah, and when it comes to 4 days of race footage, I just try and build scenes. I try and say, okay, this is a scene like where I need to accomplish something. Like whether it's an aid station, okay, we're going to watch this aid station footage and like, what's the most important couple of things that come out of this? It's probably not every little detail of clothing change, or maybe it is because we need to get that clothing change because then we go into the night, we get hypothermia and that like really messes up the race. Okay, so what's that like important thing that comes out of that scene? What do we need to accomplish with it? Or, I mean, yeah, there are going to be scenes that's just like, we just need to get through it. We just need to move through it. If you watch my edits and you hear like a drum track or something like that and you see fast cuts, and normally they're like, yeah, we just need to get through it.
Dude, that's a lot. It reminds me of like how you train or how you tackle like an ultra or like a race of any kind, like an endurance event. It's like if you think of the whole thing, it's like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to finish this thing. It's so much. But if you just chunk it down and like, okay, just get to the next aid station or just get to the next mile. It's like, just focus on this scene and then the next scene and then the next scene. And then at the end, you can just like piece it all together basically, right? It's like this big puzzle.
Yeah. And it's overwhelming to think of it. Like that's where a lot of people get stuck is like, I need the perfect film that's 40 minutes long.
Yeah.
And like, oh my gosh, how am I going to get there? And it's like, yeah, at the end of the day. And I mean, I do want to be tangible too. I don't just want to be one of those people who like puts it out there as like, you just have to start. Like that's not helpful advice. But yeah, it's like thinking about what is those bits and pieces that make sense for you. I mean, if you need to cut the ending first. Like right. There have been films that I've made where it's like, yeah, the ending was so clear. Like we'll just cut that together. Great. And there's some where it's like, okay, the middle, like Tahoe for sure. There was a big chunk in the middle where I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do with this, but I spent a lot of time on the intro while I was like thinking about the middle, you know. And I also believe like running's a huge part of my processing for an edit. Like there's definitely, and again, this gets back to like how it doesn't fit into the office box. Like there are times where it's like, okay, we're super stuck, we're frustrated, I don't know where it's going. Go for a run. You get away from the mouse, you get away from the phone, you get away from having to stare at the clips and listen, and you just kind of get to like, you get the ideas and the emotion to flow without being so burdened by like, I have to listen to it or it's at 2x speed or Premiere's freezing and crashing and getting in my way, like that kind of thing. Like everything just gets to flow in a little bit more of your idea space, and then you get to come back refreshed.
That's so cool. Dude, it's like this big series of decision making when you're editing too. That's the way I've always
thought about it. There's so many right answers, right?
Yeah.
Like that took me a while to really settle on. Is that
that's one of the hardest parts, I feel like.
There are, and you know, I had a conversation with Sally today about the film, and I was like, look, like there's a really good 20-minute film. There's also a really good 35-minute film, and neither of those are wrong answers. One just takes more time.
Yeah, that's so hard. I think it was actually Tyler that said, it's just decision making. Because I was editing some long video or something, and I was like, dude, my head hurts so bad. I'm like, why does my head hurt? I've just been editing. I mean, I'm starting to screen too, but he's like, dude, it's just decision making. It's like that like prefrontal cortex is just working every single time. Do I cut here or do I cut here? Do I move this song here or do I put it back here? Do I use this shot or this shot? It's like just decision making over and over and over again. It's like it takes so much brain power.
Yeah, it really does. And sometimes you get burdened by like, oh, well, this might not work. Should I do it?
Yeah.
It's like, I've gotten to a point where it's like, just do it. It's just pixels on a computer. You can hit undo. Like, all right, we spent 5 minutes. We chopped some of the clips around. Doesn't work. All right, we'll just undo our way out of it.
Right.
And we'll go down the other path. But like sometimes you just have to test it and try.
Do you prefer shooting or editing?
Oh, this is a great question. Jeremy. I really prefer shooting. But I will say editing the right project is incredibly gratifying and like is such a fun experience to be a part of. But like, yeah, I definitely get a lot more joy out of being out in the field on location than I do out of like just kind of chipping away, slogging away in the edit. What's
a project where you edited where you're like, oh, that one was fun. I'm glad I did that one.
Yeah, I mean, Too Strong for sure.
Yeah.
Like that was Tyler was instrumental in the whole thing, but like I really had to shoulder a brunt of the edit just because he was getting pulled away to do other projects during that time when we were working together. So that edit was great.
I mean, you've done like thousands of videos.
Yeah, I know. There's so many. I mean, there have been some like Instagram reels that I've enjoyed.
Yeah.
Like just because like it's come together, especially some of the quick turn stuff from Ultras, like the day of, like just getting to like see something, experience it, cut it together real quick, share it.
Yeah.
That's it. Yeah.
Dude, it's such a cool craft. That's so cool.
It is a craft. Like that's something too that I've tried to. Like I think there's like a lot of like glamour in some ways given to like the creator. Oh, I have all these new tools and like my perfectly crafted workspace and like I do backflips off of cliffs in Mexico and that kind of thing. But like, you know, right, like in the truest sense, like a craft isn't always glamorous.
Right.
A craftsman who makes a boat isn't like just crafting the thing. I forget what it's called, the thing that goes on the front of the boat, you know, like the pretty ornate animal head or whatever that goes on the front. Like, no, you have to make all the boring parts too.
Right.
You know, and so, yeah, I've definitely, and there's some people in the industry who I look up to who like treat it as a craft.
Yeah. So what are some like next big projects you're working on? I know we've got the Tahoe film. First, I also work with people, watch that if they want to watch it.
Yeah, for sure. The Tahoe film is going to be on Sally's YouTube channel, Sally McCrae. You can also find her on Instagram at Yellow Runner. You can also probably find it somewhere on my Instagram at Darby. We'll just throw that in there. Just throw the B in there. And you'll find me for the brand.
Never forget the B.
Yeah, so next big projects for sure. Moab 240 is going to be the last of Sally's 200-mile races this year. So we're excited to be headed out there in a couple of weeks. And then, honestly, I'm trying to ramp down here at the end of the year. Like, I'd really like December to be pretty focused on the business, on wrapping things up with excellence for the year. And also, I mean, I haven't had a chance to see my family since Christmas last year. And little nephews and nieces and stuff. So for sure, like want December to also be focused on that, because for a long time, you know, I have put work in front of family and those things. And I see now that I don't know, I want to improve on that for sure. And so, yeah, this year's slowly winding down, but I mean, Moab's going to be, Moab 240 it's a big race. It's an iconic race. People have, big names have run it. David Goggins has run it. Corey DeWalter has run it. Jeff Browning set the course record there. Like it's going to be an adventure for sure.
That's going to be sick. So are you guys putting together a film? Because it's the Grand Slam of 200s.
Yes.
Are you putting together a film for all 4 of those?
We are not putting together a film for Bigfoot. That conflicted.
That's right.
That conflicted with another project. Now there will probably be some Bigfoot stuff will probably make its way into Moab. We're still concepting that. Like for sure, this whole like Grand Slam of 200-mile races is going to be a theme that we're going to draw out in this last film.
So you have Cocodona film, Tahoe film coming out, and then Moab film.
Yep.
Will there be one like kind of compiling all 4 races into like one Grand Slam project?
It's a great idea, Jeremy.
I just thought of it.
That's a great idea. You know, we've been. I don't know yet.
Funds. We need funds.
Yeah, there's definitely. Could it be funded? And there's also just the barrier of time.
Yeah.
Because I know that Moab film, you know, we shoot in the beginning of October. Try to get it out before Thanksgiving.
Another quick turnaround.
Ideally. I mean, though, I guess before the end of the year. But yeah, like if that stretches into December, then it's like the year's over. And then, you know, the fun thing working with professional athletes, it's always something new. The off season doesn't last too long. Then we're building back
Sally.
up. Yeah. With Sally and with a couple other people who I'm working with, I know the build up for next year is something that's already being plotted and planned, and so I'm got my eyes on some things for next year for sure.
Can you talk about it yet?
No, it's not my place to talk about somebody else's athletic plans,
Fair
but
enough.
like for sure there's some sequels. That's what I'll say. There's some sequel films that I'd like to make next year that hopefully have some legs and get out there, and we can all get excited about people doing crazy things together.
I love it, dude. What's like the big dream for Drew B. Darby? Like crushing these ultramarathon films, the trail running world, the GOAT of trail media. Where do we go from here? We're just gonna like keep working our way up, or what's your big goal?
I mean, I don't know if I have a big goal right now. The 2 goals I have for myself for sure. One is I just want to do more of what I want to do and less of what I don't want to do. And that's just kind of the guiding light right now.
That's a good.
And then 2 is like, I just want to make more work that anyone can get excited about watching. Even like the narrative films I was making, like they were just kind of weird. I don't think everyone really enjoyed watching who I made watch them.
Dude, you should see some of the films that we made in high school.
Yeah.
We should have like a high school film fest.
Oh, that
relive one day.
For sure. I mean, I'll send a film. Don't invite me. You know, that kind of thing. But yeah, like more films that are just like enjoyable by people. Like I use my mom as a measuring stick. Like if my mom can watch something and she can understand it and she can enjoy it for like 45 minutes, like that's something that I enjoy. Because she's not a runner. Like she's not, but she like really enjoyed watching Choose Strong. And there was a long time with like some of the prison stuff that I was making. She was just like, like this is just like hard to watch.
Yeah.
Like, it's just like tough. And so yeah, I mean, but for sure the big guiding light is like more of what I want to do, and more of what gets me excited.
Do you think it'll be trail running or just endurance stuff in general for the next bit at least?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I'm all in on trail running. I think it's an incredible sport.
Yeah.
Whether you're the most elite athlete or whether you're at the back of the pack just trying to figure it out. Like one of my favorite films I made this year was with my friend Gabe, who was just setting out to run a 50-miler after recovering from very serious brain surgery. And that was a really special experience. I got to pace him and run with him for 12, 13 miles as a part of doing that. Too. Yeah. Cool. Because that was the only way to get cameras where we need to get cameras was you got to get out there. And so, I'm just so all in on trail running and endurance in general. Like anything where, because you have the room to like really tell a full, complete story. Like some events are just so fast, like on the track, right? Like everything happens so fast.
Right.
But so much can change in an ultra. You see people go out in front, blow up, put it back together. Mike McKnight this year at Cocodona. It was so cool. Yeah. I mean, like we were further behind at certain points, but like it was cool to like hear the rumblings of like, oh, is Mike gonna drop? Like we don't know. and they just come storming back to win it. And it's just so cool. And only in a long, serious endurance event can you get those kind of stories where it's like somebody is totally could be out of it by hours and hours. And they just come storming back to win.
Dude, Mike is a freaking savage. And like the nicest guy. Of course, every other ultra runner. They're the nicest humans. Yeah, dude, running, and I think ultra running especially, is just so like metaphorical. And it's just like so, it's a perfect canvas for storytelling, I feel like.
Yep.
And it's like you're always filming somewhere beautiful too. So it's like the footage looks nice because you're usually somewhere mountainous.
Yeah, that's a big plus too, for sure.
Dude. Well, I think we extended our chat here. I think it's already dark outside.
Oh my gosh.
We're supposed to shoot after this, but we might have missed that. So we'll have to figure that out later. But dude, thanks for coming on, man. This is fun.
Thanks for having me. No, I mean, it's fun to, I think about like we worked in the same office for a little bit, but like we really connected through running.
Yeah.
If you're familiar with Jeremy's early work, some reels, like you'll see me in there, you'll see Tyler in there, like in the background and stuff. And so, I mean, that's just another fun thing with like running has just become, it's just been fun to let that be such a central part of my life, because for so long it wasn't part of my life. And then like I became like a fan, and like I was just running all on my own for like 2.5, 3 years. And then to have it kind of just be part of this like community thing and part of work. And it's just been incredible. So yeah, thank you for inviting me on.
Oh, of course, dude.
Chatting for a while.
Of course, man. Do you think you'll ever get tired of running? I was actually thinking about this today. I was like, because I get bored of things so easily. And running it like from an objective view is like one of the most boring things you can do, but I'm like, I don't think I'll ever get bored of it. Like, do you think you ever will?
No, I'm sure there will be seasons where like I run less.
Yeah.
But honestly, like, I went through, you saw it, like I went through some injury stuff this summer and I wasn't running, and like coming back and like being out of shape. Oh my gosh, it makes me so angry. I'm so frustrated. I'm like, I do not want to feel this way again. So like, yeah, there will definitely be seasons where like right now, like I'm only running like 25, 30 miles a week, and yeah, like I wish I could be running more. I'm being smart about my build up, but like there'll be seasons of that. But no, I don't think, at least for the next like 10 years. And I have goals. I have goals too. I want to run. I have some ambitious goals for myself in running too.
BQ, 100 miler.
Yeah, for sure to both of those. Yeah.
Dude, this is great, man. Thanks for coming on, being vulnerable, sharing your story with us. I actually learned a lot of things I didn't know about you today. This is fun.
There you go. I'll bring you on my podcast when I start it.
Oh, there we go. I can't wait for Drew B. Darby experience.
Just a big B on the wall.
Yeah. Dude, where is the best place for people to connect with you? And if they want to hire you for your trail media, running media expertise?
Yeah, the two places are Instagram @DrewBDarby or drewbdarby.com. You can find me there. Reach me there.
Beautiful.
Yep.
Thanks, dude. All right. See you later, everybody. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. If you enjoyed this episode, please make sure to subscribe to the channel, leave a review, and share it with a friend. We'll see you in the next one.